Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. To be frank, if it weren't for the so-called secret mission assigned to Wood by Sengoku, Garp would have considered asking Wood to train his 2 grandsons in the East Blue. Even though Luffy and Ace were still toddlers, Garp believed that to become excellent Marines, they needed to start their training early. Wood had both the strength and a genuine sense of justice. Coupled with his young age, he would have been the perfect teacher for Garp's grandsons. But that was all in the past. Now that Wood was a pirate, even if it was just a false identity, Garp would never let him near his grandsons. Chapter 171, Wood, I even know what color Giant likes to wear. Looks like I underestimated you before. Garp mused, his tone a mix of admiration and surprise. Zephyr was right. You really are a monster, kid. If I remember correctly, you're a few years younger than Giant, and even younger than Akainu and Kizaru by a decade or so. Yet, the strength you're displaying now, while not quite at their level, isn't too far off either. Garp had always believed that Aokiji was the most talented among the Navy's younger generation. After all, he was 3 cohorts behind Akainu and Kizaru, yet had managed to match their strength. But now it seemed Garp had been wrong. Wood, who had always kept a low profile within the Navy, was proving to be the true powerhouse. Giant was younger than Aokiji, and Wood was even younger than Giant. Yet the strength he was showing could already rival Aokiji and the strongest of the Navy. Perhaps Wood couldn't defeat Akainu and Kizaru right now, but one mustn't overlook his age. And the fact that Akainu and Kizaru had devil fruits on their side. Garp's assessment of Wood was nothing short of high praise, and now that he considered Wood's tendency to keep his abilities hidden, Garp's interest was piqued. He wanted to see just how powerful Wood had become over the years. Who knew, maybe Wood's true strength was already on par with Akainu and the others. Vice Admiral Garp, you should remember, we're on the same side here. Wood hastily reminded him, trying to defuse the situation as he noticed Garp cracking his knuckles with a gleam of battle lust in his eyes. The plan was for us to stage a convincing fight. Just to keep up appearances. There were outsiders here earlier, so I played along. But now it's just us who know the truth, there's no need to get too serious about this. As Garp clenched his fists, making his knuckles crack ominously, Wood's expression grew increasingly uneasy. This wasn't the script he had been given. They were supposed to stage a mock fight, not this. Garp looked like he was ready for a real brawl. That's right, Vice Admiral Garp. Came Giant's voice suddenly, and for a moment, Wood thought she was coming to his rescue. When she began speaking, Wood nodded in agreement, silently commending Giant for always putting the bigger picture first. But then he heard the rest of her sentence, and the nodding stopped as his expression froze. It turned out Giant didn't want Garp to hold back because she was worried about Wood getting hurt. No, she just wanted to deal with him herself. But why? Wood thought in confusion. He was sure they had settled their differences before. He'd even returned her Vivre card. Giant, if I may ask. How exactly did I offend you this time? Wood asked, staring at her with a puzzled expression as she drew her blade, her killing intent unmistakable. Oh, Wood, how forgetful you are. Giant replied, her smile sweet but her tone icy. Aren't you curious about what color my underwear is? At her words, Wood's face went pale as the realization hit him. It dawned on him that he might have said something he really shouldn't have. Giant, it's a misunderstanding. I was just running my mouth. I'd never dare investigate something like that. Wood stammered, his eyes darting around, unable to meet hers directly. The truth was, he had looked into such details before. Like her favorite foods or colors. But that was purely out of interest in selling the information to Tsuru at a good price, not because he was some kind of pervert. Oh, is that so? Then tell me, what color am I wearing today? Pink, I think. And it's lacy, isn't it? Wood blurted out without thinking, an image flashing briefly in his mind. As soon as he realized what he'd said, it was too late. Giant was already unsheathing her sword. This is a mistake. It's because you're wearing that Slichong Sam, and you kicked me earlier. It was completely involuntary. Any man would have looked in that situation. Wood defended himself desperately, trying to explain away his blunder. So, if it had been someone else, you would have looked too? Jian asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Of course. I mean, if a beautiful woman gives you a peek, why wouldn't you look? Wood began, but he didn't get to finish. Jian's blade was already swinging toward him, her expression one of furious embarrassment. Enough talk. You pervert, just die already. She yelled. Wood narrowly dodged the strike, his heart pounding as he stared at the deep gouge her blade left in the ground. Jian, have you lost your mind? This was supposed to be just an act. That strike was meant to kill me, wasn't it? Wood shouted, his voice tinged with disbelief. Wood, you're overthinking it. Even in a staged fight, we have to make it look convincing. You're a tough guy, right? So it's only natural that you'd get a few cuts and bruises fighting both me and Vice Admiral Garp. Jian replied, continuing her relentless assault. Wood had no choice but to draw his sword and defend himself, now fully convinced that Jian was seriously angry. He didn't know why she was so mad, but one thing was clear, whenever Jian called him Wood. Without any rank, it meant she was really upset. Garp had originally wanted to test Wood's current strength himself, but since Jian had already taken the initiative, he decided to step back. After all, 2 against 1 would be unfair, especially given that Garp was technically a superior officer. He wasn't the type to gang up on someone younger. As the 2 young swordsmen clashed, their strikes sent shockwaves through the surroundings. Buildings and the ground around them were either sliced into pieces or left with countless scars. Though neither of them was going all out, since they weren't true enemies, their fight was more of a sparring match. Garp might not have joined in, but his keen eyes and experience allowed him to glean a lot from just observing. In terms of swordsmanship, Wood and Jian were nearly equal, both approaching the level of a great swordsman. However, in terms of physical attributes, Jian fell short of Wood. Whether it was speed, strength, or stamina, Wood had the edge. Part of this was due to Jian being female and naturally less robust than Wood, but more importantly, it was because of Wood's years of grueling physical training. Chapter 172, You actually imitated my training method. In the realm of swordsmanship, Wood and Jian were evenly matched, but Wood held a slight edge in physical strength. Regarding their use of hockey, Wood's observation hockey had evidently progressed beyond its initial stages, a development that made him notably stronger than Jian in this aspect. However, when it came to armament hockey, Wood had merely grasped the basics, while Jian had mastered using it to reinforce her weapon, the Kinpika sword. This mastery allowed Jian to occasionally overpower Wood, despite her physical inferiority. The armament hockey not only countered natural-type devil fruits but also significantly enhanced her own offensive capabilities. Under the influence of her armament hockey, Jian's Kinpika transformed into a pure black blade. Its strikes, normally equal in power to Wood's, were now substantially more potent. Wood, on the other hand, leveraged his advanced observation hockey to effortlessly dodge Jian's attacks and retaliate with precision. Although neither had been fighting seriously, Wood was genuinely surprised at the rapid improvement in Jian's abilities. It had only been about 6 months since their last encounter, shortly after Wood had defected from the Navy. At that time, freed from the full weight of his restraints, Wood had not struggled significantly against Jian. However, the short time since then had seen Jian's abilities increase dramatically. Wood still held back somewhat, but he felt that defeating Jian now was not as straightforward as before, unless you tapped into the power of the Heart of God. As their battle intensified, Wood became increasingly alarmed by Jian's quick progression. Quietly, he began to release the gravitational equipment bound to his body. Clearly, the strength Jian now displayed was putting significant pressure on him. Without shedding his gravitational gear, he might actually lose. As Wood removed his weight equipment, Jian, noticing his actions, suddenly flashed a captivating smile. She then thrust her Kinpika into the ground in front of her and began to unfasten her cape. Boom. That wasn't the sound of Wood's gravitational equipment hitting the ground but Jian tossing her cape aside. Not just the cape. After unfastening her cloak of justice, Jian reached inside her slicheongsam and removed 2 rounds of lead weights from the bindings around her thighs. The weights, once discarded, shattered the nearby rocks, underscoring their substantial mass. Wood's expression, one of almost comical bewilderment, clearly amused Jian, who couldn't hide her smugness. Wood, you've underestimated me, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Did you think I would fall into the same trap twice? After you defeated me last time, I was devastated, but it also led me to reflect deeply. In terms of swordsmanship, I, Jian, concede to no one. The difference between us was merely physical and in our use of hockey. Your observation hockey is of a high level. Catching up might be hard, as the cultivation of hockey depends largely on innate talent and insight. Knowing I couldn't match your observation hockey, I turned to focus on armament hockey, which you are less skilled at, to bridge our gap in hockey abilities. As for the physical disparity. Giant paused, letting her gaze drift to the Justice Cape and the embedded lead weights on the ground, her implication clear without words. Giant, you've actually copied my training method. Wood remarked, half joking yet with a hint of irritation. That's not acceptable. I should charge you royalties for that. And the money you owe me should be written off. Giant shrugged nonchalantly, never really expecting Wood, of all people, to repay a loan. Besides, she truly believed Wood's method of physical training was excellent. Over the past 6 months, Giant had been using these weight restraints in her movements and battles at sea. Initially, the extra weight caused frequent injuries, but as her body adapted, it became manageable, and she continued to increase the weights periodically. Throughout this time, the amount of weight Giant became accustomed to was remarkable, and while her daily movements felt unchanged, once she removed the weights, the boost in her capabilities was instantly noticeable. Just relying on this method for half a year, and I've seen such tremendous improvements in physical condition. Giant mused. And Wood, how long has he been training this way? Boom. Another loud noise erupted as Wood, too, demonstrated the extent of his training load. His vest, so heavy it created a crater in the ground, made it clear that his equipment was substantially heavier than Giant's. As they both shed their weighted equipment and commenced the second round, their speed was noticeably faster than before. Simple sprints now employed the 6 powers, instant transmission, and with their enhanced instant transmission. Even faint after images were hard to capture. Unquestionably, Wood held the advantage in this final bout. Although both had removed their weights, Wood's gear had been much heavier than Giant's, making their previously even match no longer maintainable. As the battle wore on, Giant began to show signs of faltering, and Wood's advantage grew steadily. Although Wood ultimately dominated the fight, he was not overly pleased. Instead, Giant's astonishing rate of growth sparked a renewed sense of urgency in him. Wood had been too complacent, and while he was proud of his strength at his age, he had overlooked the potential for others to grow as well. Wood is no genius compared to real prodigies like Giant. If not for being a transmigrant familiar with this world's plot and possessing cheats, he might have been just another nobody on Maple Leaf Island. Chapter 173, Garp, it's my turn again, isn't it? It's true. Today's sparring session with Giant really woke Wood up. He had assumed that with his current strength, which was on par with the young admiral's, he would naturally be a significant figure on the seas in the years to come. However, he overlooked one crucial fact: even if he can match the likes of Aokiji now, it doesn't mean he'll still be able to do so 10 years down the line. Wood's journey from an ordinary individual to his current level relied heavily on the system's support and his own relentless effort. The brutal training behind the Naval Academy and the daily combat exercises with prisoners at Impel Down, combined with the system's help and his own determination, had finally forged his current power, comparable to the young admiral's. But when Wood carefully reflected on the past, he realized that ever since completing the Multiverse simulation system, he had been somewhat complacent. Although he never skipped his daily training, he spent most of the last 6 months easily defeating weaker opponents across the 4 seas and the first half of the Grand Line. In contrast, after her defeat at his hands, Giant had taken the loss to heart and rigorously improved herself. Not only did she address her weaknesses, but she also took on various dangerous missions from headquarters, constantly battling powerful pirate crews in the New World. Giant was a natural talent, and with such intense training, it was no surprise that the gap between her and Wood had steadily narrowed. The sudden surge in Giant's strength also made Wood realize that if Giant, who is at the same level as Momousagi, could achieve such explosive growth, then couldn't Aokiji and others do the same? The mere possibility left Wood unsettled. He had always thought that with his current strength, he could take things step by step and eventually retire in peace. But now, it seemed the future held far too many uncertainties. If Giant could continuously grow stronger, then it stood to reason that the admirals could do the same. In other words, if Wood didn't continue to push himself, he could end up as nothing more than someone else's stepping stone. Having once again narrowly lost to Wood, Giant was initially quite frustrated. She was about to follow tradition and drop a few harsh words, swearing to defeat him next time. However, she was left speechless when she noticed that Wood, despite winning, looked even more downcast than she, the loser. Hey, what's the deal? You won, but you're still wearing a sour face. I'm the one who lost, not you, Major Wood. What are you so upset about? Giant asked, clearly annoyed. It was supposed to be her who needed comforting, but now she had to console the annoying guy who had just beaten her. I'm not upset, just reflecting on how true geniuses really are in a league of their own. Wood replied with a tone of admiration. Hearing this, Giant, who had just organized her thoughts to offer him some words of comfort, felt a vein pop on her forehead. Without hesitation, she delivered a swift, powerful chop to Wood's head, then spun around gracefully and walked away. She had to leave. Wood was just too infuriating. Not only did he win, but he also had the nerve to subtly insult her. If she stayed any longer, she feared their sparring match might escalate into a fight to the death. Honestly, what was I thinking? How could someone like Wood ever be downhearted? She thought to herself. She had intended to console him, but instead, she ended up getting more frustrated. Unbeknownst to Jian, she had misunderstood Wood's earlier comment. When Wood spoke of true geniuses, he was referring to her, but Jian thought he was talking about himself, implying that no matter how hard she tried, she could never catch up to him, the true genius. Because of Jian's rapid rise in power, Wood, naturally cautious, began to feel anxious again. However, he was perhaps worrying too much. Jian, who would one day become the future Vice Admiral Momouzagi, might not necessarily be directly comparable in strength to Aokiji and the others. Due to Wood's unpredictable influence, the current Jian was already far stronger than her counterpart at the same point in the original storyline. Regarding this, Garp was one of the most qualified people to speak. Akainu and Kizaru were already practically predetermined to be future admirals by headquarters, and their strength had naturally been personally tested by Sengoku and Garp. Based on the level Jian and Wood displayed in their recent battle, they were already on par with Aokiji during his evaluation years ago. Until today, Garp had never imagined that Jian's strength had quietly grown to such an extent. Aokiji and the others were already vice admirals, while Jian was still just a rear admiral. Garp thought that perhaps it was time to have a word with Sengoku about this. Indeed, in terms of age, Jian was likely much younger than Akainu and the others, but in terms of achievements, strength, and character, she was in no way inferior. The Marine headquarters usually had only 3 admiral positions, but this was not set in stone. As long as Jian could demonstrate enough value in terms of strength, it wasn't impossible for her to become the 4th admiral in the future. And the first female admiral at that. As Garp walked over to the side, he picked up the Justice cloak and vest that Wood and Jian had thrown to the ground. Jian's Justice cloak was heavy, but when he lifted Wood's vest, Garp was taken aback. It was so heavy that he couldn't easily lift it with one hand. This thing must weigh several tons, maybe even as much as a small ship. And Wood had been fighting Jian while wearing this the entire time? Wait. This kid was even wearing it during their previous confrontation when he forced Garp to retreat. Realizing this, Garp was no longer calm. Originally, Sengoku and Garp had believed that Garp, the Marine hero, had been holding back in their fight. But now it seemed that the one holding back was actually Wood. Garp, after all, was a man of some reputation, and he had always seen himself as Wood's elder. Remembering how he had praised Wood's progress with such satisfaction earlier, Garp couldn't help but blush. Wood, if you can defeat Jian, then it's my turn next. After all, we were sent by the world government to capture you, a traitor. If we don't do anything, how can we report that to Sengoku? Garp mused. Did Garp really care about Sengoku's opinion? Clearly not. Garp just wanted to save face, using his fists to reclaim his authority as an elder. Chapter 174, The Battle-Hungry Fishman. This time, when Garp expressed his intent to fight, Wood didn't refuse like before. Instead, he assumed a serious fighting stance, his mind and body fully prepared for battle. Wood's sudden change in attitude toward facing Garp was largely due to the wake-up call he received from his earlier encounter with Jian. Staying in the first half of the Grand Line and only picking off weak opponents wasn't going to help him grow. To keep getting stronger, he needed to challenge the most powerful opponents. And Garp, in his prime, was undeniably the Navy's strongest and one of the mightiest figures on the seas. He was the perfect opponent for Wood to measure his current strength. Wood knew that defeating Garp was an impossible dream at this stage, but through this battle, he hoped to understand the true height of the world's top-tier power. As Wood, brimming with fighting spirit, gripped his sword and charged at Garp, the battle between the Marines and the Sun Pirates fishermen on Anai's lobby had reached a fever pitch. With Jian and Garp no longer in their way, Tiger and his crew swiftly breached the first gate of Anai's lobby and soon encountered the giant warriors Oimo and Kashai at the second gate. Oimo and Kashai were originally members of the giant warrior pirates, led by Dory and Brogy. However, after being deceived by the world government, they had spent the last 30 years as guards at the second gate of Anai's lobby. Given that it had been 50 years by the time Luffy arrived, 30 years here aligns perfectly. Both the fishmen and the giants are considered non-human species in this world, and both are naturally more adept at combat than humans. In fact, the giants are born warriors, even more so than the fishmen. Their colossal bodies, towering tens of meters high, were enough to crush countless other intelligent species. Having a large body doesn't necessarily mean great strength, but in the case of the giants, their immense power is undeniable given their sheer size. The fishermen of the Sun Pirates could easily handle 10 ordinary Marines each, but when facing the giants Oimo and Kashai, they were clearly outclassed. The damage the fishman could inflict on the tough-skinned Kashai was minimal, while a single swing of his massive axe left the fishman severely wounded or dead. Even though the Sun Pirates had brought along some large sea kings for their assault on Anai's lobby, these creatures were much weaker on land and were soon slain by Oimo and Kashai's spears and giant axes. In the end, it was Jinbai who stepped in, and with a single fishman karate, Karakusa straight punch. He sent the towering Kashai flying, crashing into the second gate and causing it to collapse. Despite his thick skin, the giant couldn't withstand Jinbai's punch, but since Jinbai's strength hadn't yet reached the level he would achieve as a warlord of the sea in the future, he was quickly forced back by a counterattack from Oimo's spear. "Boss Tiger, leave these two giants to me. You take the others and advance to the main island. I'll catch up soon," Jinbai said. Seeing that the second gate, which Kashai's body had knocked open, was about to close again, Tiger assumed a fishman karate stance. Fishman karate, 7,000 tile true punch. As Tiger's fist struck out, a powerful shockwave blasted forward, tearing through the air. The punch, powerful enough to shatter 7,000 tiles, not only forced the closing second gate wide open again, but also sent hundreds of Marines behind it flying. Watching Jinbai still holding his ground against the two giants, and seeing the Marines with cannons and rifles advancing from the main island, Tiger knew they couldn't waste any more time. While the Sun Pirates were made up of the elite of the fishermen, most of them couldn't withstand the power of firearms and cannons. Jinbai could easily escape on his own, but the others would be in grave danger if they were surrounded. Quickly analyzing the situation, Tiger agreed with Jinbai's suggestion to leave him behind to stall the giants while the others charged into the main island of Anai's lobby. Once inside the main island, they just needed to get past the courthouse, and they would reach the final stronghold, the Tower of Justice. Having broken through 2 gates in a row, the fishermen were now unstoppable, each of them filled with adrenaline and excitement. The reason was simple: the fishermen naturally despised humans, especially the Marines and the world government. Many of the members of the Sun Pirates had joined after the crew was formed. And the newer members often heard the veterans bragging about how they and Tiger had rampaged through the Holy Land, Mary Ijos, rescuing their fellow fishermen. Although the events at Mary Ijos had occurred nearly a year ago, most of the fishermen could still recite the details by heart. Yet, it was undeniable that whenever the newcomers heard the veterans boast, they couldn't help but feel envious. They regretted not joining the Sun Pirates earlier, missing out on becoming heroes. But today, all the fishermen of the Sun Pirates were thrilled because they were currently attacking Anai's lobby, one of the 3 main agencies of the world government. And just like at Mary Ijos, their goal was to rescue one of their own. The fishman named Tom might not be someone they knew well, but that didn't matter. As long as they completed this mission with Boss Tiger, and the news reached Fishman Island, they would be regarded as heroes back home. Of course, attacking Anai's lobby might not be as impactful as the chaos they caused at Mary Ijos, where even a celestial dragon was killed. But since Anai's lobby was a direct institution of the world government, their actions here were still a direct slap in the face to the government, giving them plenty of bragging rights when they returned to Fishman District. So when Tiger led them into the main island of Anai's lobby, and they encountered the judicial hounds and the judgment jury, the fishermen felt no fear. Instead, they were even more excited. Defeating regular marine grunts might not be much to boast about back on Fishman Island, but facing the judicial hounds and the judgment jury was a different story. As for the 2 giants, while they had been eager to fight them, they simply couldn't win, so they left it to Boss Jinbai. But now, facing the judicial hounds and the judgment jury, the fishermen of the Sun Pirates felt this was their chance. Whether they would earn a marine bounty and have something to brag about back on Fishman Island all depended on this battle. Chapter 175, These fishermen must have holes in their heads. Ruth and his crew managed to return from Anai's lobby thanks to Tom's help. However, along the way, it was the fishermen of the Sun Pirates who did all the heavy lifting. The Nirvana Pirates crew had only taken down a few ordinary Marines, and now Ruth was starting to feel a bit guilty about it. So, when they encountered the judicial hounds and the judgment jury blocking their path, Ruth and his comrades exchanged glances, intending to offer to handle the situation themselves. But just as Ruth was about to express his willingness to take on the responsibility to Tiger, he noticed something strange. A wave of hostility was coming from all around them. And this hostility wasn't coming from the forces guarding Anai's lobby but from the fishermen warriors who had been fighting alongside them all this time. "You humans sure have some nerve, following behind us quietly all this way, and now you want to steal our prey?" One of the fishermen sneered. "That Tom is one of our kin, what's he got to do with you humans? Just stay out of our way. When we're done here and ready to leave, we might be generous enough to take you with us." Wood was the close friend and benefactor of the fisherman swordsman Yasuo, and with his considerable strength, Even the usually arrogant Arlong was respectful toward him. But Ruth and his crew? They were nothing special. It was one thing to have them tagging along, but now that they wanted to steal the glory? Arlong wasn't going to be polite about it. Arlong's right. We're here to save our own, so why do you humans need to get involved? There aren't even enough of these Marines for us to split among ourselves, and you want a piece of the action? Dream on. Another fisherman warrior chimed in. Realizing why the fishermen were glaring at them, Ruth and his companions were left speechless. The judicial hounds and the judgment jury weren't ordinary Marine grunts. Before deciding to stay behind and fight, Ruth had mentally prepared himself for the worst. But now, it seemed that their so-called resolve was completely unnecessary in the eyes of the Sun Pirates fishermen. Not only did the fishermen not appreciate their gesture, but they were also annoyed at them for getting in the way. For crying out loud, they were supposed to be saving their own kin. If Ruth remembered correctly, the Sun Pirates had only come here because their captain had called for help. And who was this fisherman Tom anyway? Did the Sun Pirates even know him? Brother Ruth, that's how things are. My kin can handle this situation. As for you, come with me to the Tower of Justice to rescue our target. Tiger said, interrupting Ruth's thoughts. Wood mentioned the world government agents of Cypher Pol 9 agent. I'll take care of them. Your job is to find Tom as quickly as possible and get him out of here. With Tiger putting it like that, what choice did Ruth have? If he insisted on staying to help with the judicial hounds and the judgment jury, he feared the fishermen might just kill him and his crew along with the Marines. All Ruth could think was that these fishermen had to be crazy. Ahem, as the rumors said, fishermen warriors really did love fighting. Ignoring weaker opponents, they seemed determined to take on the toughest enemies. Given the chance to avoid a tough battle, Ruth and his crew weren't going to argue. So, they quickly left Arlong and the other fishermen warriors to handle the situation at the courthouse while they followed Tiger to the final stronghold, the Tower of Justice. The Sun Pirates were indeed formidable, and combined with the element of surprise and the fact that Giant and Garp were occupied by Wood, Inai's lobby quickly fell. From the moment Wood and Tiger set foot on the island, it had only been an hour, and Inai's lobby was nearly conquered. During this hour, Spandam's mental state went through quite a roller coaster. At first, when he heard that Wood and his crew had walked into their trap, Spandam was thrilled. But when he learned that the Sun Pirates were also attacking, along with remnants of Tom's workers, he began to worry. However, his worry quickly subsided when he remembered that Inai's lobby was being defended by Navy heroes like Vice Admiral Garp and Rear Admiral Giant. Sure, Fisher Tiger was the infamous fishman who had caused havoc in Mary Ejos, but surely he couldn't compare to legends like the Pirate King Roger or the Golden Lion Shiki? With his thought, Spandam relaxed again, even setting down the Den Mushi he had picked up earlier. Who was Fisher Tiger? To the fisherman, he was undoubtedly a hero, but to the world government and the Celestial Dragons, he was a high-value criminal. After the Mary Ejos incident, the world government had ordered the Navy to hunt down these dangerous fishermen across the seas. Unfortunately, the fishermen were nearly impossible to catch in the ocean, which was like their home, and Tiger's crew was exceptionally strong, so the Navy had faced multiple setbacks, eventually giving up the chase. But now, these fishermen were on land, and with the powerful Garp and Giant at Inai's lobby, wasn't this a golden opportunity? Imagine the glory if he not only secured the blueprints for Pluton but also delivered Fisher Tiger to the Celestial Dragons. There was no need to think twice. Given the hatred the Celestial Dragons had for Fisher Tiger, such a success could propel Spandam far beyond his father's status, perhaps even making him a high-ranking official within the world government. The Sun Pirates and Tiger were high-profile criminals wanted by the world government. If Spandam alerted the government, they would undoubtedly send reinforcements. But if that happened, Spandam knew his glory would be shared, reducing his role from capturing a notorious criminal to merely providing information. Spandam was greedy. He wanted all the credit, and with the forces currently at Inai's lobby, he was confident they could handle it. Unfortunately for Spandam, stationed far in the rear, his information was severely delayed. While he was busy planning for Giant to block Wood and Garp to capture Tiger and the other fishermen, the Sun Pirates had already stormed the main island of Inai's lobby. By the time a frantic soldier burst in to report the situation, Tiger and Frankie were already fighting the three-headed judges at the courthouse, and they were about to reach him. Where's Vice Admiral Garp? Where's Rear Admiral Giant? What are they doing? Are they just letting these pirates and fishermen run wild on Inai's lobby? Spandam shouted in a panic, his anger directed at the messenger. How could the Navy's top forces be failing him now? Chapter 176, Giant, protecting Inai's lobby isn't our mission. It's not like that. Vice Admiral Garp and Rear Admiral Giant went to the front gate almost immediately, but they were held back by the Marine trader, Wood. The commotion caused by the battle between Wood and Garp had been witnessed by the Marines stationed at Inai's lobby. For those who had served as guards on the island for so long, Such a high-level battle was something they had never seen before. Inai's lobby, located in the first half of the Grand Line, was manned by Marines whose overall quality was comparable to, if not worse than, that of branch Marines. After all, branch Marines occasionally had to go out to sea to hunt down pirates, while the Marines stationed at Inai's lobby were more like security guards. They didn't have the duty of pursuing pirates, their daily routine consisted of clocking in and patrolling. And a place like Inai's lobby hadn't been attacked in hundreds of years. Unlike the Marines stationed at headquarters, who were used to large-scale battles, these Marines were understandably shocked by such intense clashes of hockey and the high-level duels between sword masters. A mere former Marine major, a traitor, can hold off two top-tier forces from headquarters? Spandam, although not very bright, wasn't entirely foolish. He might be able to believe that Jian was struggling, but Garp? The same Garp who chased down the pirate king Roger? The idea that he could be held back by a mere Marine traitor was laughable. Even if Jian couldn't handle the traitor wood, leaving Garp alone should be more than enough. So why was Jian also being stalled? As the highest-ranking officer here, I order Vice Admiral Garp and Rear Admiral Jian to temporarily abandon their pursuit of the Marine traitor wood and prioritize the capture of world government criminal Fisher Tiger. If that old man Tom really escapes, your Navy headquarters will bear the full responsibility. Furious, Spandam picked up the Den Mushi to contact Garp, wielding the world government's authority in an attempt to pressure Garp and Jian into following his orders. The idea that a Marine hero and a star Rear Admiral were being stalled by a mere traitor was absurd, and Spandam wasn't buying it. He was convinced they were just messing with him. Because Garp was still locked in fierce combat with Wood, he tossed the Den Mushi to Jian, who was watching from the sidelines. As soon as Jian picked up the receiver, the expression on the Den Mushi's face mimicked Spandam's furious scowl, and Spandam's voice roared through the device. But Jian wasn't fazed by Spandam's threats. Instead, she simply chose to ignore his so-called orders. They were Marines from headquarters, not from Inai's lobby. While they all worked for the world government, they didn't fall under the same command structure. Spandam, as the highest-ranking officer at Inai's lobby, had no authority over the officers from Marine headquarters. In terms of rank, he was on par with Jian at best. Of course, Jian wasn't Garp. If it were the latter, he wouldn't even bother acknowledging someone like Spandam, but Jian was different. Skilled in handling such matters, she responded to Spandam in an official tone. Commander Spandam, I'm afraid your words are a bit confusing to us. Have you forgotten our main objective for coming to Inai's lobby? Didn't you report to the world government that a Marine traitor was severely hindering your mission and requested our assistance in capturing the traitor wood? So, Vice Admiral Garp and I have been acting in line with that directive, doing our utmost to apprehend the Marine traitor who's disrupting your mission. Jian's tone, filled with apparent confusion, left Spandam's rage momentarily stifled, with no outlet for release. She was right. To prevent information about Pluton from leaking and to keep the credit from being shared with Marine headquarters, Spandam had requested assistance under the pretense that the Marine traitor wood was obstructing his mission. But the situation has changed. A world government criminal is about to breach the Tower of Justice and rescue a key figure in this top-secret mission. Fishman Tom. Are you Marines just going to stand by and do nothing? The expression on the Den Mushi now mirrored Spandam's, who was gritting his teeth, barely holding back his anger. Before confronting Jian, he had already reported the situation to the world government. However, even if the world government sent reinforcements through the gates of justice, they wouldn't arrive in time. Spandam had no choice but to plead with Jian and Garp for help. He planned to settle scores with them later, once he was promoted. Unfortunately for Spandam, he had no idea that Wood was still considered one of their own by Marine headquarters, and they also had their sights set on Pluton. So, there was no way they would assist him. Sorry, Commander Spandam, but our orders are to apprehend the Marine traitor Wood. That's our top priority. As for your so-called top-secret mission, we're afraid we know nothing about it. Even if you report this to the world government later, we're completely justified, as we're simply following their instructions. With that, Jian didn't give Spandam a chance to continue and hung up the Den Mushi. On the other side, staring at the now silent Den Mushi, Spandam lost it completely. He had barely been assigned to Inai's lobby, and now the entire island was being overrun. There was no doubt he would be the one to take the fall for this. The thought left Spandam in despair. But then, a glimmer of hope crossed his mind. Tom was still in his custody, and Tom knew the whereabouts of Pluton's blueprints. Even if he didn't personally hand over the blueprints to the world government, surrendering the only person who knew their location might be enough to redeem himself. You. Prepare a ship immediately. You, protect me as I bring that old man Tom to the Bridge of Hesitation. We'll escape through the gates of justice. The world government reinforcements will also be coming through that route, maybe we'll meet them halfway. Despite his youth, Spandam's cowardice, which persisted even years later, was already evident. With Anai's lobby about to fall, staying behind as a non-combatant would only mean waiting to die. Running away was the most sensible option. There was only one life to lose. While he might not get the glory, as long as he had Tom, he could still make amends. The world government would surely give him another chance. Chapter 177, Tiger. I didn't expect Wood's crew to be this weak. Spandam was still thinking of using Tom to stage a comeback, but little did he know that Frankie and the others had already rescued Tom before he could make his move. Tiger had no trouble handling the three-headed judges, while Frankie and Ruth scoured the entire Tower of Justice, managing to rescue Tom before Spandam could get to him. However, just as they were about to leave, they happened to run into Spandam, who was on his way to take Tom away, accompanied by two Cypher Pal 9 agents. Seeing that even his last chance to redeem himself was slipping away, Spandam hastily ordered the two Cypher Pal 9 agents to recapture Tom. Frankie and Iceberg, being young and inexperienced, were not much of a match. Iceberg was outmatched from the start, and Frankie, who hadn't yet become a cyborg, was equally outclassed. Tom, despite being a shipwright with immense strength, had been tortured for days and had also been on a hunger strike, leaving him with virtually no combat strength. Of everyone present, the only ones who could possibly hold off the two Cypher Pal 9 agents were Ruth and his companions. But as one of the world government's elite intelligence agencies, the Cypher Pal 9 agents were all masters of the 6 powers and had combat skills on par with a Marine headquarters captain. Although Ruth and the others had the advantage in numbers, after just a few rounds, Ruth was the only one left standing, the others had all lost consciousness. Seeing Ruth and his group on the verge of being wiped out, Spandam's panic quickly turned into gleeful laughter. Although Wood had previously instilled in him a deep sense of fear and respect for former Marines who had turned traitor, Spandam now realized that not all Marine defectors were as fearsome as Wood. Watching Ruth and his group get taken down so easily by Cypher Pal 9 agent, Spandam finally understood that Wood was an exception, a true monster. Shortly after Ruth and the others were defeated, Tiger finished off the judges and finally arrived, albeit a bit late. However, even as Tiger approached menacingly, Spandam remained unshaken. After all, they had plenty of hostages in their hands. Didn't the fishman value their own kin the most? With Tom and the others all in his grasp, what could Fisher Tiger do, no matter how powerful he was? Sorry, Tiger-san, we couldn't help at all, we just became a burden. Ruth said, filled with guilt as he looked at Tiger. Ever since he had unwillingly joined Wood's crew, Ruth had dreamed of one day making a name for himself, believing that their captain was no ordinary person. After spending so much time effortlessly defeating small-time pirates in the 4 seas, Ruth and his companions had developed an overinflated sense of confidence, thinking that all pirates were the same. But this encounter with Cypher Pal 9 agent had been a harsh wake-up call. Ruth now realized that while their crew might one day become famous across the seas, it would be solely because of their captain, Wood, not because of them. In the 4 seas, they might have no trouble bullying rookie pirates, but in the New World, they were still the same small fry they had been as Marines. As Wood's achievements grew, their crew's name would undoubtedly echo across the seas. But the question remained, did they even deserve to stay on this crew? Seeing Ruth's face, bruised and battered, with tears streaming down from the overwhelming guilt, Tiger's gaze towards Spandam turned even more hostile. To be honest, Tiger hadn't anticipated this situation at all. He had assumed that since Ruth and the others had the guts to defect alongside Wood, their strength, while not equal to Wood's, should at least be formidable enough to handle 2 Cypher Pal 9 agents. But now it was clear that he had overestimated them. Watching Ruth, who was still apologizing despite his battered state, Tiger's anger surged to its peak. Release them, and I'll let you leave this place. Tiger growled. He was confident in his ability to defeat the 2 Cypher Pal 9 agents, but with Ruth and the others in the enemy's hands, Tiger wasn't sure he could save them before they were harmed. Thus, he had no choice but to compromise. Are you kidding me? You fishmen are all untrustworthy scum, and now you want to try this on me? Do you really think I, Spandam, am that stupid? Spandam retorted angrily. Spandam's anger flared up at Tiger's attempt to negotiate. Earlier, he had believed Tom's lies and let Frankie and the others go, but now this fishman was trying to strike a deal with him. Spandam wasn't about to fall for it a second time. I always keep my word. If you don't release Ruth and the others, I won't let you leave this place. Tiger snapped back. Their goal was simply to rescue their people, they couldn't care less whether Spandam, the Anai's lobby commander, lived or died. After all, he wasn't a celestial dragon, and he hadn't done anything particularly heinous to the fishmen. Letting him live wasn't out of the question. Stop dreaming, you filthy fishman. I suggest you leave Anai's lobby quickly while you still can. I've already requested reinforcements from the world government, and they have special routes that allow them to reach Anai's lobby through the gates of justice in no time. Once the world government's reinforcements arrive, not only will these people on the ground be done for, but you criminals who rampage through Mary Ejos won't escape either. Indeed, when Fisher Tiger's attack on Anai's lobby was reported, the world government had responded immediately, even sending several Cypher Pol Zero agents as reinforcements. However, things weren't exactly as Spandam claimed. The reinforcements wouldn't arrive as quickly as he made it sound. Because Spandam, in his arrogance, had waited until Tiger was practically at the gates before asking the world government for help. Tiger, of course, had no way of knowing this, so when he heard Spandam's words, he was momentarily taken aback. Sure, they had overrun Anai's lobby in a short amount of time, but that was largely thanks to Wood holding off the most formidable foes, Garp and Giant. Wood had warned him that he couldn't hold them off forever, and once Wood faltered, the tide of the battle would quickly turn against them. If the world government's reinforcements arrived then, they might all perish here. Chapter 178, Astonishing Swordsmanship at the first gate of Anai's lobby, the primary defense line of the island. There should have been a large number of ordinary marine soldiers stationed here. However, today, not a single figure could be seen. It wasn't because the forces stationed at Anai's lobby had completely abandoned this defense line, but rather because the intensity of the battle raging here was simply too overwhelming for ordinary people to approach. In the open area, a large man in a white suit with fists gleaming with a metallic black sheen and a young man with black hair wielding two long swords were engaged in an intense, high-speed battle. Their speed was so incredible that ordinary eyes could only catch fleeting glimpses of their after images. The first gate of Anai's lobby, originally a towering steel door standing dozens of meters high, now lay collapsed on the ground, covered in fist imprints and slash marks. Without a doubt, this destruction was the work of both Wood and Garp. Moreover, it wasn't just the first gate that had suffered, the surrounding buildings had also been reduced to ruins, and the once smooth ground was now littered with craters and deep trenches. Wood, using his extraordinary observation hockey, narrowly dodged one of Garp's fists of love. Even though the blackened fist covered in armament hockey missed its target, it still created a terrifying sonic boom right next to Wood's face. Although the punch didn't land, the sheer force of it ripped through a few strands of Wood's black hair and generated a powerful shockwave that flattened the ground behind him. The pressure from the punch formed a vacuum wave that skimmed along the ground before finally crashing into the Sea Train rocket man that was heading toward the island. Though there was no direct contact, Garp's punch had somehow managed to completely dent the rocket man's train head. The Sea Train, crafted from special metals by the legendary shipwright Tom to withstand high speeds and potential-seeking attacks, wasn't as tough as sea stone, but it was far stronger than ordinary steel. Yet now, its hardest part, the train's head, was left with a massive fist-shaped dent after Garp's punch. If Tom had witnessed this scene, he would likely have been stunned. His greatest masterpiece, the pride of his shipbuilding career, had been wrecked by a single punch from Garp. Hyaki Yagio sword style, Itro. Atachi. Wood, having just dodged Garp's punch, had no time to mourn Tom's masterpiece. He immediately counterattacked, swinging his sword in a deadly arc toward Garp's chest during the brief moment when Garp was retracting his fist. The blade, wrapped in a fierce scale, shot forward with blinding speed. This attack was among Wood's most powerful, second only to those fueled by the life-force-draining power of the Heart of God. Yet, even in the face of such a swift and razor-sharp strike, Garp merely stepped aside using the instant transmission technique, easily dodging the attack. The wind blade, now missing its target, tore a trench several dozen meters long into the ground before crashing into the gate's outer wall, slicing through a chunk of granite weighing several dozen tons with a cut so smooth it gleamed. Seeing his slash miss, Garp, as the elder, had initially intended to offer some words of critique. However, his observation hockey suddenly warned him of imminent danger. Without any warning, Wood appeared in front of Garp once again, mirroring the exact same movement and footwork that Garp had just used to dodge the previous attack. Before Garp could even register his surprise, Wood's ghost-like figure had already closed in, the blade in his hand trailing a dazzling streak of light. Hyaki Yagio sword style, encore. Double Atachi. Watching this from a distance, Tsuru, who had been observing the battle, stood up in astonishment. Wood was now employing a complex sword technique that even master swordsmen found difficult to execute. A seamless transition between strikes. In swordsmanship, even the finest swordsmen experience a moment of rigidity after executing a strike, a vulnerability that can determine the outcome of a battle against a formidable opponent. Therefore, the best swordsmen aim to minimize this rigidity, closing any potential gaps in their defense. However, there are some exceptionally gifted swordsmen who adopt a technique-switching method to eliminate the rigidity of their moves entirely. While similar techniques exist in the world of pirates, In Wood's original world, a well-known sword technique that exemplifies this is the swallow return. The sword strikes as swiftly as a flying swallow, and even if the first strike doesn't hit, the swordsman can seamlessly deliver a second cut while still in a rigid state. This was the signature move of the legendary swordsman Sasaki Kojiro. The swallow return. At this moment, Wood was using a sword technique of similar difficulty and complexity. What shocked Tsuru was the sheer difficulty of this technique, one that even many famed sword masters struggled to master. Though Wood was using a dual sword style, which made the technique easier compared to single sword techniques, it was still beyond the reach of ordinary swordsmen. The second fierce wind blade shot out with even more power, and with Wood now attacking from Garp's blind spot, there was no chance for him to dodge, even if he could react in time. The vertical slash, carried by a gale, rapidly expanded as it raced forward, carving a deep trench into the ground and shooting straight toward Garp. For the first time, Garp's expression shifted as he faced the oncoming attack. His hands, now fully coated in armament hockey, turned as black as forged iron. Bang! With no way to avoid the attack, Garp chose to face it head-on. But his method of doing so caught both Wood and Tsuru completely off guard, nearly causing their jaws to drop in shock. As the massive crescent-shaped green slash bore down on him, Garp clasped his hands together and caught the blade with his bare hands, stopping the sword energy dead in its tracks. The violent winds screeched and sparks flew as Garp's hockey-coated hands clashed with the wind blade. The impact was so great that Garp's feet sank deep into the ground beneath him. "Not bad, kid. You said earlier that you were just going to cooperate with the act, but this slash had enough power to actually take me down," Garp said, his words carrying a mix of jest and admiration. However, his expression betrayed the fact that he was still holding back. Wood, who had expected his slash to at least injure Garp, watched in disbelief as Garp, with a casual expression, crushed the attack into countless fragments with his bare hands. Chapter 179, Tiger's plan to sacrifice himself. To be honest, the slash that Wood had just unleashed was nearly on par in power with the one Golden Lion Shiki had used on the day of his prison break. Yet, despite the immense power of the slash, Garp had easily crushed it with his bare hands. This was the strength of the marine hero, Monkey D. Garp. At this point in time, Garp had not yet grown old, and his power hadn't declined. Neither Wood nor Tsuru knew how much strength Garp had actually used, but it was clear he wasn't going all out. "With my current strength, I can only make the real powerhouses of this world take me somewhat seriously. What if I add the power of the Heart of God? How far can I push Garp then?" The Heart of God was a life-draining technique, and unless the situation was dire, Wood preferred not to use it. However, facing Garp, who seemed so relaxed, Wood felt a surge of battle lust. He wanted to see how far he could go if he risked everything and fought with all his might. The rune on his chest that represented the Heart of God began to emit a faint silver glow. Just as Wood was about to tap into that power to test his limits, Tsuru, who had been watching the fight, suddenly intervened. "Wood, Vice Admiral Garp, I just received a communication from Fleet Admiral Sengoku. The chief officer of Inai's lobby, Spandam, has just requested reinforcements from the world government. The reason is that they've discovered Fisher Tiger, the one responsible for the Holy Land Mary Ijo's incident, but Inai's lobby's forces aren't strong enough to capture him. The world government has already accepted Spandam's request, and in a few minutes, reinforcements will arrive through the Gate of Justice." Upon hearing this, Wood remained calm, as if he had expected this outcome when he had first sought the help of the Sun Pirates. But so what? The strongest forces of Inai's lobby, Garp and Tsuru, were both here with him, putting on a show. The remaining defenders at Inai's lobby were no match for Tiger and Jinbe. This wasn't 10 years from now. Cypher Pol 9 agents Lucci and Calitha were still young and weren't even present at Inai's lobby. The island barely had any capable fighters left. Even if the world government's reinforcements could reach them quickly through the Gate of Justice, by the time they arrived, they would already be long gone. Let's not forget, the Sun Pirates are all fishmen. They don't even need a ship to leave Inai's lobby. With 100 or so fishmen and a dozen ordinary humans, escaping from Inai's lobby before the reinforcements arrived would be a breeze. As Wood explained their detailed plans to Tsuru, asking her to cooperate in their staged pursuit later, a dendenmushi in his pocket suddenly rang. This dendenmushi had been given to Wood by Tiger during their earlier split-up, to make communication easier. Hearing it ring, Wood assumed it was Tiger reporting the success of their mission and informing him that it was time to retreat. However, when Wood answered, he saw Tiger's expression on the dendenmushi, looking rather guilty. "Brother Wood, I'm really sorry. Our rescue mission failed, and the members of your crew have been captured alive by the enemy." Hearing Tiger's remorseful tone, Wood was first struck with disbelief, followed by shock and surprise. Could it be that Inai's lobby, even without Lucci and the others, had other hidden powerhouses on the island? Of course. Saru and Garp were external forces, but Inai's lobby was still one of the three main government agencies. It made no sense for there to be no other strong fighters. He had been too careless. No, this is my fault. Tiger quickly corrected. The defensive strength on the island isn't much different from what you said, but I misjudged the strength of Sister Ruth and the others. Tiger then explained the situation they had encountered, leaving Wood speechless. What was this? A Saint Seiya mission to save Athena? With the team Tiger had, they should have been able to push through, even if it took a bit longer. But instead, they had decided to follow the typical hot-blooded anime trope of one person staying behind to hold off the enemy so that the others could escape. Tiger was a master of fishman karate, and his natural advantages as a fishman meant he was far stronger, more durable, and had better recovery abilities than any human. But fishmen also had a major weakness. Tiger and Jinbe, being large, powerful fishmen, had significant strength, but their speed on land was severely lacking. In water, this wouldn't have been a problem, but on land, saving people or capturing Spandam right under the noses of two Cypher Pol 9 agents who had mastered the instant transmission technique was incredibly difficult. I'm coming over right now. Stall Spandam and his men until I get there. If they manage to pass through the Gate of Justice, rescuing them will be a near impossible mission, and we'd have to storm Mary Ejo's itself. Wood replied. Hearing that Wood was planning to come over, Tiger was visibly taken aback. He hadn't expected that not only had Wood managed to hold off two top-tier fighters on his own, but he also had the energy to come back and help. Tiger had contacted Wood with the intention of taking a risky gamble by opening the Gate of Justice at Anai's lobby and heading directly to intercept the world government's reinforcement fleet. He planned to launch an ambush from the sea. This plan was extremely dangerous, as the world government's intelligence division was not an easy opponent to take down. But Tiger had no other choice. Abandoning Ruth, Tom, and the others and escaping with the Sun Pirates might be a practical decision, but it would be heartless, and it wasn't something Fisher Tiger could ever do. Ruth and Tom's crew were both their friends and fellow fishmen. Moreover, as the one who had made the decision for this operation, Tiger couldn't allow Ruth and the others to be taken by Spandam's men. However, if they kept dragging things out, and the world government's intelligence division arrived, the Fishman brothers of the Sun Pirates would undoubtedly suffer. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Tiger could only think of one solution: to destroy the incoming reinforcement fleet on his own. That would turn the tide of the situation. Even if the world government's agents could use the moonwalk technique, there was no way they could cross the sea without ships. And in the water, the Fishman had an absolute advantage. Destroying the ships while the enemy was unprepared wasn't an impossible task. But once he made his move, Tiger knew he wouldn't be able to escape the ensuing encirclement. Yet Tiger didn't mind this. If sacrificing himself could change the current dire situation, it was a price he was more than willing to pay. Chapter 180, Wood, who told you I was serious before? Fishman Karate. Burekon. Tiger gathered a water ball in his hand and unleashed it with immense force. The high-speed water cannon, packed with incredible power, blasted through Spandam's warship with a single shot, completely piercing through it. Seeing the sheer power of Tiger's attack, Spandam was so frightened that even his snot started to drip. The water blast had narrowly missed his head, nearly scaring him to the point of wetting himself. However, realizing that he still had hostages, and knowing that if Tiger attacked him, the Cypher Pol 9 agents by his side could kill Tom and the others, Spandam regained some of his composure. In fact, when he saw his escape ship destroyed by Tiger's attack, Spandam angrily shouted at Tiger, trying to cover his fear with bravado. You lunatic. Do you really think we won't fight back? With his warship blown apart by Tiger's Burekon. Spandam was both furious and desperate. To prove he wasn't bluffing, he grabbed Ruth, who had already been incapacitated, from the ground and placed a long sword against his neck. Among his captives, only Tom the Fishman was truly important to Spandam, the others were expendable in his eyes. To intimidate Tiger, Spandam felt it necessary to make an example of someone, to show that he wasn't joking around. I advise you not to do that, Tiger said. The person you're holding is Brother Wood's first mate. I seem to recall you being quite afraid of Brother Wood. If you kill his first mate, aren't you afraid of his revenge afterward? You should know that if he decides to kill you, even Cypher Pol 9 agent won't be able to protect you. Hearing Tiger words, Spandam suddenly recalled the terror that man had instilled in him at Tom's workshop, and his heart trembled with fear. He briefly considered releasing Ruth and grabbing a softer target, like Frankie or Iceberg, to maintain his leverage. But Spandam quickly realized that doing so would make him look weak, so he nervously responded. Don't forget, that traitor is currently facing both Garp and Momazagi. He's barely holding his own. Even if he were here, what could he do to me? Unless he doesn't care about these people's lives. Before Spandam could finish his sentence, The expression on his face shifted from smug confidence to sheer terror. He wasn't able to complete his sentence because, at some point, a long sword had appeared behind him, resting directly against his throat. At almost the exact moment that Wood's presence registered in his mind, the two Cypher Pol 9 agents standing in front of Spandam turned around in shock and fear. They noticed the strange silver glow emanating from the runes on Wood's chest, barely visible through his clothes. Before they could even begin to comprehend what kind of power this was or how Wood had appeared behind them without their knowledge, a fist the size of a sandbag filled their vision. One of the Cypher Pol 9 agents, standing closest to Wood, didn't even have time to react before Wood's heavy punch connected squarely with his face, sending his body flying towards Tiger like a cannonball. The other Cypher Pol 9 agent, seeing Wood make his move, instinctively extended a finger, attempting to use finger pistol to finish off Frankie and the others lying on the ground. But before he could act, a silver arc flashed through the air. In the next moment, the Cypher Pol 9 agent felt a sharp pain in his right arm, followed by the sight of his own severed limb flying through the air. This is impossible. Even if you were holding back last time, there's no way you could have become this strong. Despite losing an arm, the Cypher Pol 9 agent, an elite of the world government's intelligence division, managed to stifle any cries of pain. His mind, however, was fixated on what had happened to Wood to make him so much stronger. During their previous encounter at Tom's workshop, these two Cypher Pol 9 agents had crossed paths with Wood. While they hadn't considered themselves his equal, they hadn't felt such a vast difference in strength. But now, Wood had not only appeared behind them without their notice but had also effortlessly incapacitated both of them, leaving one severely injured with a single punch and a sword strike. Impossible? Who told you that I was serious the last time we met? Wood replied. In the world government's intelligence division, Cypher Pol 9 agent was known for being exceptionally powerful. As masters of the Marine 6 styles, they were considered the reserve team for Cypher Pol 0 agent, the highest echelon of the world government's intelligence forces. But the two Cypher Pol 9 agents before Wood were nowhere near the level of Rob Lucci or Kaku. A year or two ago, defeating opponents like these might have been a challenge for Wood, but now, they were hardly worth his effort. As for why this Cypher Pol 9 agent felt Wood had grown so much stronger? Of course, he would. During the encounter at Tom's workshop, Wood hadn't been serious at all. His only goal had been to escape. Now, however, Wood had removed all his weighted gear and had even tapped into the power of the Heart of God to reach this location as quickly as possible. At this point, even if the two Cypher Pol 0 agents Wood had fought in Mary Ejos were standing before him, they would likely fall after just a few more strikes. The Cypher Pol 9 agent who had been sent flying towards Tiger didn't even have a chance to utter a word before Tiger's powerful fishman karate punch crushed his skull, killing him instantly. The other Cypher Pol 9 agent, now missing an arm, realized he had no chance of survival against both Wood and Tiger. Letting out a furious roar, he charged straight at Wood. It wasn't that the Cypher Pol 9 agent was particularly brave or unafraid of death. It was simply that he had no way to escape. If he were only facing Tiger, his chances of survival would have been relatively high. After all, on land, a fishman's mobility couldn't match that of someone who had mastered the Marine 6 styles. A skill set akin to superhuman abilities. Unfortunately for him, Wood was not just superhuman. He was a monster far beyond that. This Cypher Pol 9 agent wasn't a protagonist, his roar wouldn't increase his strength, nor would he suddenly gain a last-minute power boost. As brilliant arcs of sword light crisscrossed the air, the Cypher Pol 9 agent's body was riddled with wounds, and he collapsed into a pool of his own blood. I'm with the world government. I'm the highest executive officer of NI's lobby. You can't kill me, or the world government will never let you go. Seeing the two Cypher Pol 9 agents, who had easily taken down Ruth and the others earlier, now lying dead with no chance to fight back against Wood and Tiger, Spandam finally felt the full weight of fear descend upon him. Chapter 181, Spandam's attempt to turn Wood. What's this? Do you really think I'm afraid of the world government coming after me? Hearing Spandam's bravado-filled threats, Tiger only gave him a dismissive look. What a joke. Maybe others would hesitate because of Spandam's status, but to Fisher Tiger, one of the main culprits behind the burning of the Holy Land Mary Ejos, this was nothing. They had already set the world government's headquarters ablaze. Why would they care about killing a small fry like Spandam, even if it angered the world government? Traitor of the Marines. No, Major Wood. It's understandable that Fisher Tiger, a notorious criminal wanted by the world government, wouldn't care about making enemies. But you're different, aren't you? If you kill me, you'll be provoking the world government. Tiger was already beyond caring. Like someone with too many lice who no longer feels the bites. He had burned Mary Ejos to the ground and was already a notorious criminal in the eyes of the world government. Another offense wouldn't make a difference to him. But Wood was different. As a pirate, he was still a newcomer. Although he had angered the Marines, he had yet to cross the world government. Seeing Wood remain silent instead of immediately taking action, Spandam thought he had a chance. He began to push his agenda more aggressively, even trying to sow discord. Major Wood, you were once a Marine, right? I don't know why you betrayed them, but it must have been out of desperation. But that's not a problem now. Before us, we have Fisher Tiger, one of the most wanted criminals by the world government, and Tom, the fishman who possesses the design for the Pluton. If we capture them and hand them over to the world government, not only will your bounty be lifted, but you could also rise to great heights. I work for the world government. If you help me capture Fisher Tiger and Tom, I can guarantee you'll at least get a rank of Rear Admiral if you want to return to the Marines. If you don't want to return, with your skills and abilities, I can recommend you join the highest intelligence agency of the world government. Seeing Wood's continued silence, Spandam thought his plan was working and grew even more excited. The fact that Inai's lobby was breached. No problem. The fact that Cypher Pol 9 agent, his protectors, were killed? An even smaller issue. In Spandam's mind, as long as they could capture Fisher Tiger and Tom, those would be two massive achievements. Compared to those achievements, everything else was minor. And Spandam wasn't just making empty promises. If he could secure those accomplishments, he genuinely had the power to fulfill those promises. Spandam had connections, and Wood hadn't yet made any enemies within the world government. Washing away his sins and returning to the fold would be easy. As for what the Marines might think, Spandam didn't care at all. The Marines were just the lapdogs of the world government. Even if they had objections, they would have to shut up and follow orders from the world government. At that moment, Spandam was filled with anticipation, impressed with his own cleverness. He couldn't believe he had come up with such a brilliant plan to turn the tables in this dire situation. If Wood accepted his offer, Spandam could instantly reverse his fortunes. Wood's strength was undeniable. Although Spandam was a weakling himself and couldn't accurately judge strength, he felt that based on Cypher Pol 9 agent's previous performance, Wood likely had a good chance of defeating Tiger. Even if Wood couldn't defeat Tiger, he only needed to stall him long enough. Once the world government's reinforcements arrived, victory would be assured. As Spandam continued to try to manipulate Wood, Tiger stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching the scene with a mocking smile. He didn't seem the least bit concerned that Wood might be swayed. To be honest, the offer Spandam made was quite tempting. If Wood had been an ordinary Marine deserter, he might have accepted the offer and immediately gone back to being a law-abiding officer. However, Tiger knew something else about Wood. His other identity as the Sword Saint of the Fishmen, Yasuo. Wood hadn't made any enemies within the world government? When Spandam said that, Tiger, usually serious, almost couldn't help but laugh. Honestly, if anyone in the world had truly enraged the world government, the first would be the revolutionary, Dragon, but the second wouldn't be Tiger. It would be the former Marine Major standing before Spandam. Working for the world government? If that day ever came, Tiger would bet it would be because Wood was there to kill someone. Tiger wasn't worried at all about Spandam's attempts to recruit Wood because he knew Wood had already killed 2 celestial dragons. How could someone who had committed such a crime ever serve the world government? Moreover, Tiger believed that Wood was a person of integrity. If he had deserted the Marines, it was likely because of his moral principles. If he couldn't stand working for the Marine headquarters, then working for the more corrupt world government would be out of the question. However, what Tiger didn't know was that Wood had actually considered Spandam's offer, seriously weighing its feasibility. The world government held too many secrets. The lost century of history, and the enigmatic figure of him. Wood had crossed over before One Piece was completed, leaving many mysteries unanswered by Oda-sensei. If he could infiltrate the world government and rise through its ranks, who knew what secrets he might uncover? Of course, Wood might try to infiltrate the world government one day, but that day was not today. Setting aside the fact that he was still an undercover agent within Marine headquarters, the price Spandam was offering wasn't worth it to Wood. Tom, maybe. But betraying Tiger, who had risked his life to earn Wood's trust, just for a chance to join the world government and antagonize the entire Fishman race and Fishman Island. Only an idiot would do that. As Spandam noticed Wood's prolonged silence, he hesitated, just about to sweeten the deal when he felt a sharp pain in his neck and then blacked out. Brother Wood, why didn't you just kill this guy? He doesn't seem like a good person at all. If you let him live, who knows what trouble he might cause later on. Tiger was puzzled as to why Wood had only knocked Spandam unconscious with a chop to the neck instead of killing him outright. Tiger had no sympathy for Spandam, especially after he had used Ruth and the others to threaten him. The Fishman had little love for humans to begin with, and Tiger, in particular, despised scum like Spandam. Chapter 182, Planning to make Anai's Lobby the home of the Fishmen? Spandam is, after all, the highest authority on Anai's lobby and a member of the world government. We're still not entirely out of danger, so keeping him alive might prove useful in a critical moment. Besides, the reason I was able to arrive here so quickly is because of a favor I owe someone. If Spandam were to die, she would likely take the blame. Wood's intentions were clear. He planned to use Spandam as a hostage. While the world government might not care much about the life of someone like Spandam, the station forces at Anai's lobby and the Navy headquarters would likely be more concerned. Of course, this was also an excuse Wood used to placate Tiger. In truth, it was Giant who had asked him to spare Spandam's life. The Navy headquarters had dispatched 2 significant forces to hunt down Wood, the Marine traitor. It would be one thing if they failed to capture him, but if the commanding officer, Spandam, were also killed, it would be hard to justify. In other words, while they were acting, they couldn't overdo it. Otherwise, the Navy headquarters wouldn't be able to explain it to the world government. Tiger, who had initially been puzzled by how Wood could arrive despite facing 2 formidable enemies, finally understood after hearing Wood's explanation. Giant, also known as Vice Admiral Mo Mauzagi, out of respect for her connection with Wood, not only went easy during the fight but even disobeyed orders to hold back the Marine hero Garp. In return, Wood had promised Mo Mauzagi that he would preserve the Navy's dignity by ensuring that Spandam, under their protection, wouldn't die here. Tiger didn't doubt Wood's words at all because he knew Wood was also the Fishman's Sword Saint Yasuo, and it was with Mo Mauzagi that Wood had once carried out a mission in the Holy Land Mary Ejos. The world government's reinforcements will arrive soon. We've already rescued the people, so now it's time to make our escape like mad rabbits. Tom, Ruth, and the others were all severely injured and unconscious, but for someone as strong as Tiger, carrying over a dozen people wasn't difficult. As the 2 carried the unconscious Ruth and others back to the main island, they happened upon Jinbi, who had just helped Arlong defeat the last member of the Anai's lobby jury. The guilty jury was a special force of Anai's lobby, physically imposing and wielding massive black iron balls as weapons. But when Wood and Tiger arrived, they saw the jury member, who was considered a demon by criminals, being held like a small dog by Jinbi, with the iron ball shattered to pieces on the ground. Tiger boss, you guys are done too? Jinbi noticed Tiger carrying the injured crew and immediately stepped forward to help, showing his strong sense of camaraderie. Meanwhile, a slightly out of breath but still boastful Arlong spoke up. So, this so-called Anai's lobby isn't that great after all. I thought it would be more dangerous, but the Marines here are weaklings. They're nothing compared to the humans we encountered at Mary Ejos. Tiger boss, I think this island is perfect. How about we stay here and make it the base for the Sun Pirates? The thought of not only breaking through one of the 3 great government facilities but also claiming the island as their own filled Arlong with a sense of pride. Don't be ridiculous, Arlong. The world government must already know we're here on Anai's lobby. They'll soon send Marines to capture us. Staying here won't do us any good, and making this island our base would be a direct challenge to the world government. They won't let that slide. Jinbi, ever the voice of reason, pointed out that while the fishmen had long dreamed of living on land, taking over Anai's lobby was too reckless. If they dare come, we'll just fight them off. You're not afraid of some Marines, are you, Jinbi? Just now, I alone took down nearly 1,000 of those weakling Marines. Why should we run from such small fry? Shouldn't it be these weak, inferior beings who should be running instead? Perhaps frustrated by Jinbi's better performance or emboldened by the easy victory over the weak Marines, Arlong wasn't worried at all about the prospect of facing the world government's reinforcements. In fact, he even suggested turning Anai's lobby into the Fishmen's headquarters. And he wasn't the only one among the fishmen who was tempted by Arlong's idea. Oh, should I say it's what we should expect from the Sun Pirates, who dared to wreak havoc at Mary Ejos and assault Anai's lobby. You don't even take the Marines seriously and call them small fry. As a vice admiral, I can't just ignore those words. Tiger was about to scold Arlong when an elderly man with black hair, dressed in a white suit, suddenly appeared before them, punching Arlong, who had just boasted loudly. There was no need to guess, the man was Garp, the Marine hero. Wood could feel that the punch Garp threw was serious. There was no acting, and he genuinely intended to kill Arlong. Like Zephyr, veterans like Garp had a special attachment to the Marines. In normal circumstances, Garp was a fun-loving person, always joking around despite his age, much like an old child. But what Arlong shouldn't have done was insult the Marine soldiers in front of Garp. For Garp, that was an unforgivable offense. You could curse the world government, Garp himself, or even call the entire Navy the lapdogs of the Celestial Dragons, but you couldn't insult the lower-ranked soldiers who fought for justice in front of Garp. Garp's fist, covered in armament hockey, caused a sonic boom in the air. Even before the punch landed, Arlong already felt an overwhelming pressure that made him completely unable to move. Absolute terror of death washed over him, and in that moment, Arlong realized just how ridiculous his previous thoughts had been. The fishmen might have superior natural abilities compared to humans, but not all humans were inferior beings as they believed. At least, in the face of this suffocating pressure, Arlong felt that he was the true inferior being before Garp. Chapter 183, The Marine Hero vs. the Fishman Hero. When Garp suddenly made his move, Wood could have stepped in to block the punch aimed at Arlong, but he hesitated at the critical moment. To be honest, since Tiger was still alive, Arlong wasn't as bad as he might have been otherwise, but he was still far from being a good guy. Wood stepping in to take Garp's furious punch wouldn't just injure himself, but also potentially put him at odds with Garp. If Garp had been attacking Tiger or Jinbe, Wood wouldn't have hesitated to intervene, but for Arlong? Sorry, Wood didn't have much affection for him. Arlong's loyalty to his comrades couldn't be questioned, but his personality and actions were another story. If one day he dragged the entire Sun Pirates into trouble, Wood wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Boom. As Garp's punch landed, a powerful shockwave erupted between them, scattering debris and sending the fishman who had been standing next to Arlong flying. Despite Garp's formidable punch, the relatively unremarkable Arlong somehow survived. Of course, his survival wasn't due to his own strength, nor because Garp held back. It was because someone else had taken the hit for him. While Wood chose to turn a blind eye to the punch aimed at Arlong, the same couldn't be said for Tiger. This man was incredibly loyal and caring, and Arlong had followed him through life and death situations many times. Despite Arlong's flaws, Tiger couldn't just stand by and do nothing. One was a hero of the fishmen, who had rescued his people and wreaked havoc in the holy land of Mary Ejos. The other was the hero of the Marines, who had captured the Pirate King and was recognized as such across the seas. In terms of height, Garp, though already over 2 meters tall, still seemed small compared to the fishman Tiger. The clash between these two heroes was surprisingly short, leaving everyone present in shock. Tiger had stepped forward just in time to shield Arlong from Garp's powerful punch, but the outcome was far from what the fishman had expected. Tiger wasn't called a hero of the fishmen just for his deeds, his strength played a significant role in earning the title. To put it bluntly, Jinbe and the others called him boss because Fisher Tiger was the strongest among the fishmen. On Fishman Island, even King Neptune might not be a match for him. So in the eyes of most fishmen, their boss Tiger was invincible. But just now, all the fishmen present saw their hero, Fisher Tiger, get sent flying hundreds of meters by a single punch from the old Marine. That's right. Tiger, who had crossed his arms to block Garp's punch in front of Arlong, looked utterly battered. In terms of size and weight, Tiger was several times larger than Garp, but even so, he was still sent flying by Garp's punch. The moment Tiger took the punch head-on, the bones in his arms nearly shattered instantly, and his large body skidded hundreds of meters across the ground before coming to a stop. With just one punch, Garp proved that while both might be heroes, the title of Marine Hero carried far more weight than that of the Fishman Hero. Was Tiger strong? Absolutely. He had caused chaos in Mary Ejos and escaped afterward. Tiger's strength was such that he could likely hold his own in the New World. But unfortunately, while Tiger was strong, his opponent was on another level entirely. Even now, before he had aged significantly, Garp's strength could easily rank among the top 3 in the world. In Wood's estimation, Tiger's strength was on par with an elite vice admiral from headquarters. About the same level as Momouzagi. However, Garp, despite technically being a vice admiral, could likely handle the younger admirals with ease. Seeing their revered leader Tiger taken down with a single punch, the fishmen of the Sun Pirates, disregarding the disparity in strength, grabbed their weapons and charged at Garp. Leading the charge were Arlong, with his serrated sword, and Jinbe, employing fishman karate. If Tiger, the strongest of the fishmen, had been severely injured in one blow, it was obvious what fate awaited Jinbe and Arlong when they challenged Garp. Though the fishmen of the Sun Pirates could normally take on 100 humans each, they were clearly out of their depth against Garp. Within just a few exchanges, the Sun Pirates, who had torn through Inai's lobby, were left scattered across the ground when faced with a boss-level figure like Garp. As Garp effortlessly dispatched his comrades, Tiger slowly stood up again. His arms hung limply at his sides, but he forced them up, preparing to continue fighting Garp. However, just as Tiger, filled with the resolve to die fighting for his comrades, was about to charge at Garp, a figure suddenly stepped in front of him. Tiger boss, take the Sun Pirates and the people from Tom's workers and leave now. As for my crew, I'm counting on you to get them out of here. Let me handle Vice Admiral Garp. I'll hold him off and buy you enough time to escape. Hearing Wood's words, Tiger and the other fishmen, including the fallen Jinbe, were all stunned. When they realized what Wood meant, Tiger's first instinct was to refuse. Others might not know who Wood really was, but Tiger was well aware. This wasn't the first time Wood had risked his life to protect the fishmen. It didn't make sense to have him bear the burden again. If someone had to stay behind to fight this marine hero, it should be Fisher Tiger, not Wood, who had already sacrificed once for them. Now's not the time for courtesy. Even if I stay behind, I'm confident I can survive. Besides, if you stay, do you really think the other fishmen would listen to me and leave? Right now, we don't have a ship, and the only way to escape Anai's lobby is through the water. If they refuse to go, Tom's workers and my crew will be left behind to die. This whole operation to storm Anai's lobby happened because of my request. It's only right that I take responsibility now that things have gone south. Chapter 184, Wood once again stays behind for the fishmen. Tiger wanted to say something, but Wood clearly didn't give him the chance. Instead, he drew his swords, Tenku and Asahi, and charged forward to engage Garp. The two famed blades clashed with Garp's fist, and the ground beneath them cracked from the immense force of the collision. The shockwave rippled outwards, sending waves of pressure through the air. Despite Wood's dual-wielded assault, he couldn't gain the upper hand in close combat with Garp. Instead, he was forced back by a powerful punch. However, Wood, who had just withstood Garp's heavy blow, was clearly unharmed. He pushed off the ground with both feet and re-engaged Garp in battle. For a moment, the sound of dark fists clashing with blades echoed endlessly. The fishmen standing around were left stunned. Marine hero Garp was a man who could injure their boss Tiger with a single punch. Yet, here was Wood, the fishman ally, holding his own against him. The members of the Sun Pirates had initially respected Wood to some extent, mainly because Tiger had said that Wood had saved their fishman's sword Saint Yasuo. But as far as they were concerned, Wood's own strength must have been just ordinary, otherwise, why would he have only been a mere marine major before? But seeing the scene before them now, Arlong and the others realized just how wrong they had been. Could someone who had saved their fishman's sword Saint Yasuo and become his close friend really be an ordinary person? If Wood were just a regular guy, would their boss Tiger be calling him Brother Wood so affectionately? Now Arlong and the others remembered that when tasks were being assigned earlier, Wood had mentioned that he could hold off both Marine hero Garp and Vice Admiral Momouzagi on his own. Before, the members of the Sun Pirates hadn't met Garp in person and didn't know how powerful he was. But now, they understood just how difficult Wood's task had been. They even began to think that the fact Wood had been able to stall Garp for so long while they fought on Anai's lobby was nothing short of miraculous. Why are you idiots just standing there? Without Giant's help, I won't be able to hold out against Vice Admiral Garp for long. Seeing the fishmen standing around in a daze, Wood couldn't help but become frustrated. Almost as soon as he was distracted by speaking, Garp's fist smashed into Wood's face. The iron fist, as large as a sandbag, sent Wood flying like a cannonball, his body plowing a 100-meter-long trench in the ground. Tiger boss, let's listen to Mr. Wood. As much as I hate to admit it, if we stay here any longer, we'll only be dragging him down. And from what I've seen, Mr. Wood is holding his own against the marine hero. He should be able to escape on his own. No one who had a chance to survive would want to die, so the other fishmen of the Sun Pirates, aside from Jinbei, began to urge Tiger to leave. Take Brother Ruth and Tom with you, and we'll leave Anai's lobby right away. Remember, even if we die, we can't let Mr. Wood's crew be harmed. The fishmen all nodded in agreement with Tiger's command. Although they disliked humans, they would show special respect to someone who had helped them multiple times. Since Wood had chosen to take on the dangerous task of staying behind, the fishmen naturally wanted to show him their gratitude. Even Arlong, who typically hated humans, didn't utter a word of complaint. He simply picked up two of Wood's crew members and, with his actions, expressed his resolve. As for taking over Anai's lobby, Arlong didn't dare mention that idea anymore. The fear Garp had instilled in him still loomed like a shadow over him. Watching the fierce battle between the two humans, Arlong felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. Either one of them could easily kill him in an instant, and he couldn't help but feel deep resentment. All his life, he had taken pride in being a fishman and considered humans to be inferior beings. But facing these two now, Arlong had to admit that his pride was meaningless. There were hardly any Marines left on the island who could continue fighting. Given Tiger's current group, there weren't many who could stop them. The back of Anai's lobby led to the gates of justice, and leaving that way would only lead them to encounter the world government's reinforcements. So, the Sun Pirates quickly made their way back to the front of Anai's lobby, planning to escape from there. However, just as Tiger and the others were about to jump into the sea, a figure suddenly blocked their path. Yes, the one standing in their way was none other than Wood's old classmate, the Marine known as Momouzagi. Vice Admiral Giant. With her sword Kanpira in hand, Giant stood calmly, facing the many fishmen of the Sun Pirates alone. Jinbi wanted to step forward to buy time for his comrades to escape, but before he could move, Tiger placed a hand on his shoulder. Vice Admiral Jian, we're all friends of Brother Wood. He spared the life of the NI's lobby's warden in keeping with his agreement with you. I wonder if you could see fit to let us go? Although Tiger, Jinbi, and the others had been injured by Garp, they weren't entirely without the strength to fight. But if they delayed any longer, the world government's reinforcements would arrive, and they wouldn't just fail to escape. They would also betray Wood's trust and leave Ruth, Tom, and the others to die here. Jian, as usual, maintained her aloof demeanor, showing no sign of wanting to speak. But Tiger had Jinbi leave Spandam behind, and then, without hesitation, walked past Jian. The fishman had already witnessed Jian's strength. Even their boss Tiger, leaving himself exposed to a strong swordswoman, was taking a considerable risk. But before they could warn him, they saw Tiger walk past Jian unharmed, as if she hadn't even noticed him. Seeing Tiger cross safely, the rest of the Sun Pirates quickly followed suit, leaving behind the still stationary Jian. Tiger boss, what's going on? Is that Marine Vice Admiral on our side too? Chapter 185, The Accidental Discovery of the Pluton Blueprints. The group collectively let out a sigh of relief, having avoided what could have been a deadly battle. However, Jinbi soon found himself puzzled. Why would Vice Admiral Momauzagi, who was known for her staunch sense of justice on the seas, choose to let them go? You could say that she did it out of respect for Brother Wood. Tiger explained. Vice Admiral Momauzagi and Brother Wood were classmates at the Navy Academy, and it seems their relationship was quite special. Given their connection, it's likely that Momauzagi wouldn't allow Brother Wood to die at Garp's hands. Our priority now is to leave this place as quickly as possible. Jinbi and Darlong were curious about the details of this unusual relationship, but the current situation didn't allow for such inquiries. They could only hasten their steps. Meanwhile, Jian, standing by with the unconscious Spandam at her feet, glanced back at the retreating figures of Tiger and the others. She then turned her gaze towards a certain part of Vinay's lobby and muttered to herself. What on earth is Garp doing? Tom has already been rescued by the fishmen, so our mission is technically complete. Why is he still fighting with Wood? If the world government's reinforcements arrive, it will be difficult for Wood to escape. At that moment, back on NI's lobby's main island, the battle between Wood and Garp had entered its latter stages. Wood had initially believed that Garp was just playing along to give the Sun Pirates a convincing show. However, despite Tiger and his crew being long gone, Garp showed no signs of stopping. In fact, he seemed to be getting more and more excited as the fight went on. With each of Wood's wind-enhanced slashes, the buildings of Vinay's lobby were effortlessly sliced apart like cake, yet Garp easily shattered these slashes with his iron fists. Wood's physical conditioning, honed over many years, far surpassed that of others his age. While his physique allowed him to overpower someone like Jian, it was utterly insufficient against the monstrous strength of Garp. In their direct clashes, Wood relied heavily on his special observation hockey to predict and evade Garp's attacks. However, whenever he couldn't dodge, he would usually find himself sent flying by Garp's punches. The scale of their battle was immense, turning the entire NI's lobby into their battlefield. Wood, with a single slash, cleaved the entire courthouse in half, only to be sent flying by Garp from the main island to the front island with a single punch. To put that into perspective, Garp's punch sent Wood flying over 10 kilometers, smashing through two of NI's lobby's main gates along the way. Boom. Wood's body, like a meteor, streaked across half of NI's lobby before crashing down onto the front island, skidding across the ground before colliding with the sea train rocketman that had just arrived. The impact was tremendous, and the steel train was completely pierced through by Wood's body. Nearby, Jian, who had witnessed the scene, quickly rushed over to check on Wood. Wood, what's going on with you two? Vice Admiral Garp doesn't seem to be holding back at all. Jian looked at the mangled remains of the sea train and, after sensing that Wood's vital signs were still stable, let out a sigh of relief before asking what exactly was going on. I'd like to know that myself. Wasn't this supposed to be an act? But Vice Admiral Garp is really trying to beat me to death. If it weren't for my body being... Wood, still in the midst of the wreckage, was about to explain but suddenly noticed something in the remains of the train. There, in the wrecked front compartment of the rocketman, he saw a hidden compartment. And due to the train being completely smashed apart by Wood's impact, several sheets of paper had fallen right beside him. Wood's heart raced as he had a hunch about what these papers could be. He stood up and took a closer look. As he inspected the sheets, Wood realized they contained what appeared to be engineering diagrams. However, the structure depicted on them wasn't a sea train but rather some sort of large battleship. While he could decipher the general layout from the diagrams, the text accompanying them was completely unreadable to him. If these were sea train blueprints, they would have been drawn by Tom, but Tom wouldn't have written in ancient script. This could only mean one thing. The papers Wood now held were the long-sought blueprints of the Pluton, which the world government and Navy headquarters had been searching for. It turned out Tom really did possess the Pluton blueprints. And he had hidden them in the front of the decommissioned sea train, Rocketman. Upon reflection, it made perfect sense. The best place to hide something was often in plain sight, under the very noses of those searching for it. The world government would never have suspected that the blueprints had been right before them all along. Spandam certainly hadn't expected it either. After all, Frankie and the others had kept their promise and returned with the Pluton blueprints after leaving Water 7. The first sea train, Rocketman, held special significance for Tom, making it an ideal hiding spot for the Pluton blueprints. However, even Tom hadn't anticipated that his two beloved apprentices would use it to come to Anai's lobby to rescue him. Quietly tucking the blueprints into his jacket, Wood had just pushed himself out of the wreckage when he saw Giant scolding Garp with the stern demeanor of a daughter rebuking her father. Garp, meanwhile, no longer resembled a marine hero but rather a child who had been caught misbehaving, awkwardly accepting Giant's reprimands. Giant's angry expression reminded Garp of a young Tsuru, which made him feel a great deal of pressure. Moreover, Garp knew it was indeed his fault. Wood had proven to be incredibly resilient, and no matter how much Garp gradually increased the intensity of his attacks, the young man kept up. This rare occurrence sparked Garp's competitive spirit, and he had unintentionally begun to take the fight seriously. "All right, Giant, calm down. Look, Wood is fine, right? I promise, I'll follow your lead and not intervene from now on. Even if you're particularly concerned about this brat, I'm still your senior and superior, so give me a bit of face, will you?" Garp's words caused a faint blush to appear on Giant's cool, composed face, and she quickly retorted. "Who said I'm concerned about him? I'm just worried that your antics will jeopardize Fleet Admiral Sengoku's classified mission. Besides, Wood was once my subordinate, so this is purely a superior's concern for a former junior." Chapter 186, World Government Reinforcements Arrive. "What do you mean I'm fine? That punch from Vice Admiral Garp just broke 3 of my ribs." Wood groaned, his earlier excitement from finding the Pluton blueprints quickly fading as he pushed aside the rubble and saw the sails of the warships that now surrounded Anai's lobby. Any sense of relief evaporated. It was clear that during his intense fight with Garp, Wood had completely overlooked the world government reinforcements that were closing in. Now, the entire island was surrounded. And it wasn't just that they were surrounded. Garp's last punch had really done a number on Wood. Not only were 3 of his ribs broken, but the high-intensity battle had severely drained his stamina. With the way the world government operates, if you told them you're a Navy spy, you'd probably be dragged back to one of their interrogation facilities for some serious torture. Garp said, his tone grim. "Don't count on Sengoku to bail you out. His influence means nothing to the 5 elders. You need to focus on escaping. This is my mess, so I'll take care of one of the warships to the northwest. You can use that as your exit point." Wood couldn't afford to be captured. If he was, his fate would be nothing short of tragic. Whether or not he really was a Navy spy. The fact that he had called on the help of criminals like Fisher Tiger and now possessed the Pluton blueprints meant that the world government would never let him go. Even Sengoku himself wouldn't be able to save Wood if the world government decided to go after him. Destroying world government warships was a serious crime, but Garp's status was extraordinary. Although he wasn't the fleet admiral, his position might even be more respected. If Garp had killed a celestial dragon, there'd be no escape from execution. But destroying a few warships and taking out some intelligence officers, Garp might lose his rank, but he probably wouldn't be executed. Giant didn't say anything, but the way she silently drew her sword, Kanpira, made her stance clear. "Don't be reckless," Wood said, his tone weary. "Things might be looking bad for me right now, but it's not worth turning against the entire world government. After this, I'll probably end up on their blacklist anyway." Wood's expression was one of resignation as he spoke, and as he did, the runes on his chest began to glow with a silvery light, something that didn't escape the notice of Giant and Garp, who looked on in surprise. "Sir, we've reached Inai's lobby, but the lookout reports that over half the island's structures have been destroyed, and the defensive forces are in total disarray." An officer reported to the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander aboard one of the many warships that had arrived. "Vice Admiral Garp and Rear Admiral Momozaki are still engaged in combat with the enemy. The world government had sent a fleet of 30 warships to reinforce Anai's lobby, most of which were filled with low-ranking intelligence officers. Little more than cannon fodder. The highest-ranking officer, however, was none other than the head of Cypher Pol Zero agent, an individual whose status was equivalent to that of the Navy's fleet admiral. In fact, as a direct subordinate of the world government, the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander's rank was arguably higher than the fleet admiral's. The Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander frowned at the report, clearly displeased. He was about to send more troops to the island to gather information when a figure suddenly appeared on their ship. There's no need to send anyone else. The defensive forces on Anai's lobby have already been decimated, Garp announced, suddenly standing on the deck with an unconscious Spandam slung over his shoulder. The only ones left on the island are the Navy trader Wood, who's currently locked in battle with Rear Admiral Momauzagi. Wood's strength is on par with that of a high-ranking Navy Vice Admiral. Any ordinary soldier would be throwing their life away by engaging him. But you Cipher Pulse Zero agents, the so-called strongest shield of the Celestial Dragons, might just stand a chance. Garp wasn't alone. He had brought Spandam with him as a captive. His explanation was that he had been busy protecting Spandam, the highest authority on Anai's lobby, which was why he hadn't been able to continue fighting. He also made it clear that it wasn't the Navy's fault that things had gone wrong, the problem lay with the incompetence of the forces stationed on Anai's lobby. Despite having over 10,000 soldiers, including elite units like the Judicial Hounds and a jury of guilty verdicts, they had been overrun by a few hundred fishmen. Garp claimed that he and Giant had been on the verge of capturing Wood and severely injuring Tiger, but they had been let down by the island's defenses. The entire force had crumbled under the assault of a few hundred fishmen, and even their highest-ranking officer had been taken hostage. Anai's lobby, one of the world government's three great institutions, had thoroughly disgraced itself. Spandam, still unconscious, couldn't defend himself against these accusations. And in truth, most of what Garp said was accurate. Without Garp and Giant, Anai's lobby would have been helpless against Wood and the Sun Pirates. And Spandam really had been taken hostage. As for Tiger's injuries, who could say if they were really caused by Giant? Speaking of which, doesn't the world government owe the Navy an explanation? Garp continued. We were told that we were coming here to capture the traitor Wood and assist Spandam with his mission. But Fisher Tiger, the man who attacked Mary Jo Eyes, being here? That's news to us. Sure, Shipwright Tom is a fishman, but would Tiger really risk so much just to save one of his kind? It makes you wonder if the world government is hiding something from us. Like maybe there's more to Tom than meets the eye. Garp's speculation was cut short as the Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander raised a hand to silence him. Garp, mind your place. The Cipher Pulse Zero agent leader said coolly. The Navy was sent here by the world government to assist, nothing more. Don't go digging into things that don't concern you. Had it been anyone other than Garp standing before him, the Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander wouldn't have even bothered with an explanation. The world government wasn't surprised by the Sun Pirates' sudden appearance. After all, Fisher Tiger was notorious for his willingness to do anything for his fellow fishmen, including storming Mary Jo Eyes. Compared to the world government headquarters, Anai's lobby was a relatively minor target. And if Tom really did possess the Pluton blueprints, the world government wouldn't be surprised if the fishmen were interested in such a powerful weapon, given the long-standing animosity between humans and fishmen. Chapter 187, Sink Anai's Lobby. According to Vice Admiral Garp, the only ones left on Anai's lobby are Rear Admiral Momauzagi and that Navy traitor, Wood? The Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander asked, narrowing his eyes. What about Fisher Tiger and the other fishmen? Have they escaped the island? The Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander had intended to send scouts to assess the situation, but with Garp freshly returned from the island, asking him directly was faster. As far as I know, that girl Giant is still locked in battle with the traitor Wood. As for whether the fishmen have fled the island, I couldn't say. Garp replied, nonchalantly picking his nose. Despite the commander's high rank, Garp's casual demeanor made it clear that he didn't care much for the authority of the world government. The Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander, aware of Garp's notorious attitude, didn't take offense. Instead, he quickly summoned a messenger. Order all ships to prepare for an all-out bombardment of Anai's lobby in 1 minute. The messenger hesitated briefly, stunned by the order, but quickly regained his composure and rushed to relay the command to the other ships. You're planning to launch a buster call on Anai's lobby? Are you insane? This is a world government stronghold. What about the soldiers still on the island? And the buster call requires authorization from a Navy admiral or the fleet admiral. Garp's usually calm demeanor cracked as he glared at the Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander, clearly disturbed by the extreme order. Garp, I think you're mistaken about something. The Cipher Pulse Zero agent commander replied coolly. The so-called buster call, usually carried out by 10 warships and 5 vice admirals along with elite Navy forces, is only under the Navy's jurisdiction because the world government allows it. As the highest intelligence agency of the world government, we don't need the Navy's approval to initiate such a strike. As for the soldiers on the island, if they couldn't stop a few hundred fishmen, they're of no value to us. The greatest failure would be letting Fisher Tiger and the other fishmen escape. Once they reach the sea, they'll be nearly impossible to catch. So, destroying the entire island and burying them with it is the best course of action. Rear Admiral Momozuki is strong enough to escape on her own, so the only ones who will die are useless soldiers and the fishmen. The Cypher Pulse Zero agent commander's words were delivered without a hint of emotion, as if wiping out thousands of lives was a trivial matter. Garp's eyes burned with rage, and he almost lashed out, but the Cypher Pulse Zero agent operatives around him were quick to intervene, preventing an all-out confrontation. While Garp held a revered position within the Navy, a direct conflict with the Cypher Pulse Zero agent commander would have serious repercussions. Garp wasn't worried about himself, but his actions could have severe consequences for the entire Navy. A standard buster call, consisting of 10 warships, 5 vice admirals, and elite forces, was capable of annihilating a small to medium-sized island within minutes through relentless bombardment. But this time, the world government had deployed 30 warships, along with the elite Cypher Pulse Zero agents, effectively tripling the power of a regular buster call. With such overwhelming firepower, Inai's lobby could be obliterated in mere minutes. As the first shell from the lead ship exploded on the island, it acted like a signal flare. The remaining 29 warships simultaneously opened fire, unleashing a devastating barrage on Inai's lobby. The sky was filled with the roar of cannon fire, and the island was soon engulfed in flames and smoke as explosions rocked the ground. Wood and Jian, who had been engaging in a mock battle on the main island, were initially confused by the sudden disturbance. However, they quickly realized what was happening as they saw countless shells arcing through the sky toward them. Wood swiftly swung his sword, Tenku, detonating dozens of shells midair before they could reach him. The acrid smell of gunpowder and smoke filled the air as the blasts echoed across the island. "We were supposed to put on a show to clear your name," Wood remarked, smirking bitterly. "But it seems the world government doesn't have the patience for that. They're not even bothering to set foot on the island. They're just going to obliterate it along with us." Wood wasn't surprised by the world government's ruthlessness. However, Giant seemed shaken by the cold reality. How could they? There are still so many soldiers on the island. They didn't even give them a warning or time to evacuate. Inai's lobby is a government facility. Are they really willing to destroy their own people? Their own people? The higher-ups in the world government don't see you as their own. Wood replied with a scoff. To them, you're just disposable tools. Destroying the island without giving the soldiers time to evacuate also means not giving Tiger and his crew more time to escape. Jian, you need to get out of here. I have to figure out my own way to escape now. Wood added, his tone serious. Jian was clearly struggling to process the situation, but Wood's words seemed to hit her hard. The reality of the world government's priorities was a harsh wake-up call. Wood wasn't worried about Jian's ability to survive the bombardment. As a skilled swordsman capable of using moonwalk, she could easily escape even if the island were completely destroyed. However, Wood knew that dealing with the bombardment was the least of his concerns. The real threat was the Cypher Pulse Zero agents surrounding the island. You should go first, Wood urged. Even if the island sinks, I can survive. Jian hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation. She still intended to try and save as many of the stranded Navy soldiers as possible, but Wood didn't stop her. He knew her well enough to understand that she wouldn't be dissuaded, and he trusted in her abilities. As Jian prepared to leave, Wood steeled himself for what lay ahead. The bombardment was only the beginning. The real challenge would be facing the Cypher Pulse Zero agents who were closing in on him. Chapter 188, 1/to decimate Cypher Pulse Zero agent. The Cypher Pulse Zero agent commander knew that the fishmen could swim and that the Navy trader, Wood, could use moonwalk. He wasn't relying solely on the bombardment to eliminate all enemies on the island. The indiscriminate barrage was meant to destroy obstacles that hindered visibility and to clear out the weaker foes. Meanwhile, on the flagship where the Cypher Pulse Zero agent commander resided, sentries kept a close watch on both the sea and the sky, prepared to react immediately if any fishman attempted to dive into the ocean or if Wood tried to escape using moonwalk. The bombardment raged on, and within minutes, every building on the island was reduced to rubble. It became clear that Wood, who had intended to escape using moonwalk, was easily spotted amidst the encirclement of 30 warships. At the commander's signal, 3 Cypher Pulse Zero agents in white suits, each of varying height and build, took off at high speed using moonwalk, swiftly closing in on Wood's position. The bombardment was useless against an opponent who could use moonwalk. Sending ordinary Cypher Pulse agents after him would only slow them down or result in needless deaths. Only the elite Cypher Pulse Zero agents were deemed capable of handling Wood. The Cypher Pulse Zero agent commander himself did not bother to engage Wood directly, deeming him unworthy. His primary target was Fisher Tiger, the man who had dared to attack Mary Ijos and trample on the world government's dignity. As for Wood, Though reports indicated he was formidable, the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander saw no need to exert himself. Sending 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents was already giving Wood more respect than he deserved. This mission was doomed to fail not only because of Spandam's incompetence but also due to the Navy's lackluster performance. The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander remarked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Who would have thought that the so-called hero of the Navy, Garp, and the much-lauded Rear Admiral Momazagi would be unable to capture a single traitor? His words were a clear jab at the Navy, suggesting that their reputation was nothing more than empty boasts. The Cypher Pol Zero agents, on the other hand, represented true strength, their capabilities hidden behind their clandestine nature. Garp, seemingly unbothered by the taunts, continued to pick his nose nonchalantly. He didn't bother to respond, instead watching the 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents chase after Wood with a knowing smirk, waiting for the inevitable turn of events. While Garp acknowledged that Cypher Pol Zero agent was indeed powerful, he was certain that Wood's abilities far exceeded what the Cypher Pol Zero agents anticipated. The idea that 3 agents could subdue Wood was laughable to him, but he chose to let the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander learn this lesson the hard way. As Wood left the devastation of Inai's lobby behind, he noticed 3 figures in white suits rapidly approaching him from one of the warships. The distinctive white attire and the use of 6 powers confirmed that these were Cypher Pol Zero agents. Old foes. In the past, during the Mary Ejos incident, Wood could only manage a victory against a single Cypher Pol Zero agent. Facing 2 at once would put him at a severe disadvantage. Now, the world government had sent 3 to capture him. But things were different now. Wood wasn't the same as before. However, instead of confronting them head-on, he chose to flee again. Not out of fear, but as a tactical maneuver to create distance between himself and the larger enemy force. It didn't matter if he could defeat these 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents, there were likely more where they came from, and if they fell, their commander might decide to step in personally. Wood wasn't made of steel, and he had no intention of fighting the entire Cypher Pol Zero agent. His priority was to escape safely. Seeing Wood flee, the Cypher Pol Zero agents weren't surprised. After all, they represented the world government's most elite intelligence agency, and it was only natural for most pirates to run when confronted by them. Their commander had instructed them to capture Wood as quickly as possible, not just to complete the mission but also to show up the Navy. If Cypher Pol Zero agent could capture a raider that even Garp and Momazagi couldn't, it would be a significant blow to the Navy's reputation. The chase continued until Wood led them several kilometers away from Inai's lobby. Finally, he stopped, seemingly deciding to make his stand. Have you given up because you realize you can't escape our net, or are you simply out of strength after the battle on the island? One of the Cypher Pol Zero agents taunted. You shouldn't have stopped. If you kept running like a rat, you might have lived a little longer. Now that you've stopped, this battle will end in an instant because we will finish you off in one strike. The Cypher Pol Zero agents were so confident that they didn't even bother to attack together, instead arguing over who would get the first blow. After all, their commander was watching, and they wanted to prove themselves. Indeed, the battle on the island took a lot out of me, but dealing with the likes of you should still be easy enough. Wood replied calmly. The reason I stopped is because I think we're far enough now. And you're right. The fight will end in an instant. But it won't be me who's finished. It'll be you 3. As Wood spoke, the rune on his chest, representing the heart of the gods, began to glow with a brilliant silver light. The Cypher Pol Zero agents barely had time to register the light before a massive, blinding slash filled their vision. Hyaki Yagio sword style, single blade ultimate technique. Higanbana. A radiant slash, born from the blade of a Seiaru, expanded to a terrifying length of several hundred meters, obliterating everything in its path. Chapter 189, Wood's daring escape in the land of the dead. There is a flower called the Higanbana that grows in places filled with death but paradoxically holds a touch of life and beauty. It's said that those who see the Higanbana are witnessing the embodiment of death itself. The flower offers a vision of beauty to those on the brink of death, allowing them to see something truly magnificent before passing away. The 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents facing Wood never expected that his slash would not only be powerful but also dazzling. As the radiant blade, stretching hundreds of meters, enveloped them, they were momentarily stunned. Just as they attempted to dodge or defend, the sheer brilliance of the attack entranced them, freezing them in place. In that fleeting moment of vulnerability, the massive, glowing slash cut through the sky, slicing all 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents cleanly in half. They died with strange smiles on their faces, passing in a state of eerie tranquility, as if they had glimpsed something beautiful at the end of their lives. The enormous crescent slash, after effortlessly killing the 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents, continued to grow, expanding to a terrifying length of nearly a kilometer. It then cut through the sea, slicing 3 large warships in half before vanishing into the distant horizon, leaving behind massive waves. Both Garp and the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander were stunned, as were the remaining 27 warships filled with intelligence agents. In a single strike, Wood had not only eliminated 3 elite Cypher Pol Zero agents but also destroyed 3 large warships. For the ordinary intelligence agents aboard the warships, it was a shocking display, something they could barely comprehend. Even seasoned figures like Garp and the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander took a moment to regain their composure. Garp was shocked because, during the battle on Anai's lobby, he had believed he had gauged Wood's strength accurately. But now, it was clear that Wood had held back a significant portion of his power. More than Garp had ever imagined. The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander, on the other hand, was stunned by the ease with which Wood had slain his subordinates. The slash was undeniably powerful, but the fact that his 3 skilled agents hadn't even had time to react was what truly unsettled him. He had seen them start to move, only to freeze in place as if something had suddenly jammed their minds. Garp, seizing the opportunity to rub salt in the wound, said, "I did tell you that the Navy trader Wood was powerful, didn't I? You mocked the strength of our headquarters, but it seems that Cypher Pol Zero agent, the so-called strongest intelligence agency of the world government, isn't all that impressive. At least when we fought him, we managed to push him back without getting killed in a single blow." The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander, already fuming, nearly exploded with rage at Garp's mocking words. He had seen clearly that Garp was just as shocked by Wood's attack as he was. It was obvious that either Wood had held back when fighting Garp or that the slash was a last resort technique, something he couldn't use repeatedly. Regardless of the reason, the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander was furious, knowing he had no solid proof to argue with Garp, especially with Garp being as stubborn as he was. Instead, he had to swallow his pride and admit that Wood's strength far exceeded their expectations. Enraged by the loss of his subordinates and the need to restore his pride in front of Garp, the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander decided to personally engage Wood. He was convinced that the devastating slash was a one-time move, something Wood couldn't replicate in quick succession. His assumption was correct. The power of the Heart of the Gods had drained a significant amount of Wood's life force, resulting in the extraordinary power of that slash. Now, Wood was far too exhausted to fight the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander or unleash another attack of that magnitude. Drained and fatigued, both mentally and physically, Wood forced himself to push through, using Moonwalk to flee at high speed once more. The silver rune on his chest glowed again, though dimmer this time, and it enhanced his speed to such an extent that he covered several kilometers in mere seconds. The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander, who had just prepared to give chase with Moonwalk, froze as he watched Wood's incredible burst of speed. At that distance, even if he pushed himself to the limit, he knew he had no hope of catching up. Garp, ever the provocateur, couldn't resist commenting. "Not going after him? I was looking forward to seeing how the strongest intelligence officer of the world government measures up. But it looks like I'll have to miss out this time." The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander, already seething with frustration, nearly exploded in anger at Garp's taunt. Unable to do anything to Garp, he redirected his fury elsewhere, ordering his forces to intensify the bombardment and sink Anai's lobby as quickly as possible. As Wood sped away with the power of the Heart of the Gods augmenting his moonwalk, his feet left sonic booms in the air, making him appear like a blur as he darted across the sky. But after covering hundreds of nautical miles and sensing that the pursuit had ceased, his body, worn out and depleted, suddenly lost its momentum, and he plummeted into the sea like a kite with its string cut. Back at Anai's lobby, the 27 remaining warships continued their bombardment, waiting for the island to be completely destroyed. However, apart from Wood and Momazagi who had left earlier, no one else attempted to leave the island. This meant that before Wood's departure, the world government's most wanted criminal, Fisher Tiger, and his crew of fishmen had likely already escaped. The Cypher Pol Zero agent commander was far from satisfied with this outcome. Despite mobilizing such a massive force, they had failed to capture Fisher Tiger or obtain the blueprints for Pluton. To make matters worse, they had lost 3 warships and seen their agents cut down effortlessly. How would he ever explain this failure when he returned? Chapter 190, Momazagi, the 4th Admiral in Waiting? As the commander of the operation, the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader faced a dismal outcome. They failed to capture the fishmen, didn't secure the blueprints of the Pluton, and even allowed the Navy trader Wood to escape right under their noses. To make matters worse, they not only obliterated Anai's lobby, an important government facility, but also lost 3 warships in the process. Such a disastrous mission report left the Cypher Pol Zero agent commander at a loss for how to present it to the world government's top brass. Not only had they achieved nothing, but the massive losses also made it likely that he would be severely reprimanded. Perhaps even forced into early retirement. Looking for someone to share the blame was natural, but trying to pin it on Garp or Momauzagi would be a futile effort. After all, the world government had only tasked the Navy with apprehending the rogue Marine Wood. The matters concerning Fisher Tiger and the Pluton blueprints were not directly the Navy's responsibility, making it inappropriate to shift the blame onto them. Commander, I believe that neither the Navy nor the Cypher Pol agent organization should bear the primary responsibility for this mission's failure. Momauzagi said. The blame lies entirely with Spandam, the highest-ranking official at Inai's lobby. The Cypher Pol Zero agent leader, who had been brooding over the mission's failure, suddenly perked up at Momauzagi's words. If he could avoid taking the blame, he certainly wouldn't hesitate. After all, as a high-ranking official, he wasn't eager to relinquish his position. Please elaborate, Momauzagi. The Cypher Pol Zero agent leader said, a newfound hope in his voice. The Marine headquarters was well aware of Wood's strength, which is why they sent Garp and me to assist in this operation. Initially, everything was proceeding smoothly, but Spandam refused to share crucial information with us. His poor decision-making led to the unexpected appearance of the Sun Pirates. Furthermore, the insufficient defense of Inai's lobby itself contributed to this disaster. Momauzagi continued. The failure to capture Wood and Fisher Tiger wasn't due to the world government's reinforcements arriving too late. Rather, Spandam's arrogance and delay in requesting backup were the true causes. By the time Cypher Pol Zero agent arrived, it was already too late to salvage the situation. She added. Additionally, the person who pulled strings within the world government to get Spandam to request assistance bears significant responsibility. Had this person not concealed vital information, Fleet Admiral Sengoku would have undoubtedly sent more reinforcements than just Garp and me. The more the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader listened, the brighter his eyes shone. He had been reminded that, while the Navy couldn't take the fall, Spandam could. And if Spandam alone wasn't enough, his influential connections within the world government, like his father Spandine, could also be implicated. This was precisely why Momauzagi and Wood had spared Spandam's life. It would have been difficult to pin the blame on a dead man, especially one who died in the line of duty. By doing this, Momauzagi not only cleared any lingering doubt over the Navy's involvement but also gained the gratitude of the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader. You're every bit as astute as the rumors suggest, Momauzagi. The Cypher Pol Zero agent leader said with newfound admiration. Not only are you an exceptional warrior, but your keen insight and wisdom set you apart. I wouldn't be surprised if you were to be considered for the position of admiral soon. Momauzagi's words had indeed inspired the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader. If Spandam wasn't sufficient to shoulder the blame, then implicating his backers within the world government was a viable solution. This also aligned with why she and Wood had spared Spandam. The move was calculated to clear the Navy of any responsibility and secure a powerful ally within the Cypher Pol Zero agent. And now, the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader was more than willing to reciprocate by supporting Momauzagi's future candidacy for the admiral position. Although the three current admirals, Okainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji, were already seen as the top candidates, having the backing of a key figure in the world government could pave the way for a potential fourth admiral. As for the unfortunate Spandam, who remained unconscious, he was blissfully unaware that he had been saddled with a monumental burden of blame. Even if he were conscious, there would be little he could do to defend himself, given that much of what Momauzagi said was indeed true. You've got some skill there, Momauzagi. Garp said, finally speaking up. I didn't expect you to be even more devious than Tsuru. I thought you'd be seething with anger at the Cypher Pol Zero agent leader for bombing Inai's lobby, but here you are, cutting deals. It was Wood's suggestion. Momauzagi admitted. He said that while the soldiers of Inai's lobby may have died unjustly, confronting the world government directly would get us nowhere. By handling it this way, we not only sidestep the issue but also secure compensation for the fallen soldiers. As a by-the-book Marine, Momauzagi did harbor resentment towards the Cypher Pol Zero agent's actions. However, she had to concede that Wood's approach, pragmatic as it was, offered a better resolution. I'm starting to wonder just how sharp Wood's mind really is. Garp mused. From getting the Sun Pirates involved, to sparing Spandam, to predicting Cypher Pol Zero agent's arrival. It seems he had everything planned from the start. Garp continued. It's one thing to have talent and strength, but to have a brain like that on top of it all? Zephyr sure found a real gem. I've heard that Wood was just an ordinary lumberjack on his island. How does a kid like that have such extraordinary abilities? Could his parents have been someone important? Garp, who had secretly taken care of the pirate King Roger's son, couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Wood's lineage. After all, the idea that great bloodlines produce great individuals wasn't entirely unfounded. Wood's background information indicated that he was from Maple Island in the first half of the Grand Line, and as an orphan, his parents' identities were unknown. But if someone with Wood's potential turned out to be an orphan, it raised intriguing questions about his true heritage. Chapter 191, The Crew's New Bounties. The Anais Lobby incident had come to an end, and after some negotiation with the Marines, Cypher Pol Zero agent submitted a report to the world government. The report was carefully worded, stating that Anais Lobby was bombarded, causing significant casualties among the fishermen, with key figures like Fisher Tiger and Tom listed as missing, presumed dead. While the Marine trader Wood was reported as seriously injured and on the run. The phrase missing, presumed dead was deliberately chosen. The Cypher Pol Zero agent officer didn't dare claim that Fisher Tiger and the others had been killed because he knew better. However, if the report had outright stated they were still alive, the world government would have been furious to learn that they used massive firepower. Enough to obliterate Anais Lobby. Yet failed to kill even a single important target. The consequences would have been severe. By saying they were missing, Cypher Pol Zero agent managed to imply some level of success while avoiding any definitive statements. After all, if Tiger and Tom resurfaced later, they wouldn't have to explain why they hadn't been killed. As for the general casualties among the fishermen, that was of little concern to the world government. Apart from Fisher Tiger and a few other key figures, the rest of the fishermen were of no importance to them. Even with such careful wording, the world government was still enraged. However, with Spandam and his father taking the fall, Cypher Pol Zero agent managed to escape the worst. When Spandam regained consciousness, he fiercely defended himself, but with the Marine's testimony against him and the undeniable evidence that he had delayed the report, his fate was sealed. Worse still, he dragged his father, Spandine, down with him. Meanwhile, the Sun Pirates had taken the members of Tom's workers and the others to a deserted island. There, Tiger noticed that Wood's life paper was burning rapidly. Ignoring Jinby and the others' attempts to stop him, Tiger followed the life paper's trail and found Wood, who had been floating in the sea for hours. Luckily, Wood wasn't a devil fruit user, and thanks to his strong vitality, he had managed to survive despite being on the verge of exhaustion. In the pirate world, people were known for their tenacious life forces and impressive recovery abilities. After just a few days of rest on the deserted island, Wood, Tom, and the others were back to full health. Once Tom had recovered, the first thing he did was kneel and express his heartfelt thanks to everyone. He was genuinely surprised that Wood, Tiger, and the others had risked their lives to storm Anais Lobby for him, even though they didn't know him that well. They had even made enemies of the world government in the process. Moved by their selflessness, Tom decided it would be dishonorable to continue hiding the truth from them. So, he confessed to Tiger and the others about why Spandam had targeted him and revealed the location where he had hidden the blueprints for Pluton. When they heard that Tom had hidden Pluton's blueprints inside the Rocketman's engine, everyone was stunned. Frankie and Iceberg exchanged shocked looks, unsure of how to explain themselves to their mentor. What? You used the Rocketman to storm Anais Lobby and left it there? Tom was thunderstruck by Iceberg's words. He had done so much and risked his life to keep the Pluton blueprints out of the world government's hands, and now Frankie and the others had practically delivered it to them. Tom understood all too well how dangerous Pluton was. If the world government got its hands on it, it would spell disaster. Upon hearing that such a terrifying ancient weapon might fall into the hands of the world government, even Tiger and Jinby looked deeply troubled. At this point, the Sun Pirates were second only to the Revolutionary Army in terms of how much they had provoked the world government. The fishermen didn't want to see the world government obtain such a dangerous weapon, so they were even considering storming Mary Ejo's once more to destroy the Pluton blueprints. If the Pluton blueprints were hidden inside the Rocketman, then there's no need to worry. Wood interjected. Before I left, the world government's forces unleashed a buster call on Anais Lobby. Now, there's nothing left. Not even a trace of the Rocketman. Though the Rocketman was reduced to rubble, Wood had secretly retrieved the Pluton blueprints beforehand. But would he tell anyone that? Of course not. Everyone knew the value of keeping quiet when you're sitting on a treasure. Well, that's one way to look at it. Tom sighed, relieved. Even though we've lost our ancestors' wisdom, it's better that such a dangerous thing never sees the light of day again. Hearing that the Pluton blueprints might have been destroyed along with Anais Lobby, Tom's expression was somber, but he soon came to terms with it. Losing the ancient wisdom was regrettable, but as long as the world government didn't get it, that was all that mattered. Tiger and Jinby seemed to accept this outcome, but the other fishermen, like Arlong, couldn't help but feel disappointed. Given the favor they had done for Tom by saving him, and considering they were all fellow fishermen, if Tiger had asked Tom for the blueprints, he probably wouldn't have refused. With an ancient weapon like Pluton, the fishermen would have a much better chance of standing up to humans. They'd be one step closer to their dream of living on land. As everyone processed their mixed feelings about the apparent loss of the Pluton blueprints, a fisherman suddenly burst in, waving a newspaper and a stack of wadded posters. Inai's lobby, one of the world government's three main institutions, had been the site of a major incident, and the head of the news organization, Morgans, wasn't about to let that go unnoticed. Fisher Tiger, the fishman hero who had already caused an uproar at the Holy Land of Mary Ejos, had attacked Inai's lobby for the sake of his fellow fishmen. The Sun Pirate's name had once again spread across the seas. Not only had Tiger's bounty increased significantly, but so had those of Jinbi, Arlong, and all the other officers. Their bounties had nearly doubled. But aside from the Sun Pirates, another pirate crew had made its debut on the world stage. The Nirvana Pirates, who were thought to have just been along for the ride. Due to their relatively low-profile performance, Ruth and the others' bounties had only seen symbolic increases. However, when they flipped to the last wanted poster and saw a face identical to their captain staring back at them, along with the bounty amount listed underneath, they were collectively stunned. In disbelief, Ruth and the others checked the poster several times over. No matter how many times they looked, all the zeros were still there. But it didn't make any sense. The world government's greatest enemy should be Tiger, who was once again considered the mastermind behind the whole incident. So why was their captain's bounty so much higher than Tiger's? Chapter 192, Wood's Skyrocketing Bounty. Wood, the marine trader, was responsible for releasing the prisoners from Impel Down, ruthlessly killing a marine branch colonel, and being one of the culprits behind the destruction of Inai's lobby. A dangerous individual. Capture him dead or alive. Bounty, 1 billion Baileys. That's right. 1 billion Baileys. Ruth couldn't believe his eyes and double-checked the bounty posters several times, but no matter how many times he counted, the number was indeed 10 digits long. Fisher Tiger, the supposed mastermind, had only seen his bounty increase from 350 million Baileys to 500 million Baileys. But their captain, Wood, had gone from 120 million Baileys all the way to 1 billion Baileys. Double Tiger's bounty. It wasn't just Ruth and the others who were shocked. Wood himself was completely dumbfounded when he saw the bounty poster. For a moment, he thought the Marines must have made a printing error. But no matter how many times he looked, the face on the poster was definitely his. Then Wood considered another possibility. Perhaps his secret identity as the fishman swordsman Yasuo had been exposed. If that were the case, combining the two identities might indeed justify such a high bounty. However, only a handful of people knew about that alias, Giant, Tiger, and a few others. Even Sengoku had only vague suspicions. It didn't seem likely that his secret had been uncovered. Tiger, noticing Wood's confusion, also considered this possibility but shook his head to indicate that he hadn't revealed Wood's identity to anyone. Not even to his most trusted comrades, Jinbi and Arlong. Still baffled, Wood eventually found an excuse to slip away from the group. Once alone, he discreetly pulled out his private Den Mushi and contacted Sengoku. Since the Inai's lobby incident, Sengoku had tried several times to get in touch with Wood. However, Wood had pushed himself so hard during the battle that he had fallen into a coma afterward, making it impossible for Sengoku to reach him. Den Mushi weren't advanced enough to leave voicemail messages, so Sengoku had been left anxiously wondering about Wood's condition. But thanks to Giant, who had Wood's life paper, they had been able to confirm that he was still alive and safe. After returning to headquarters, Giant had briefed Sengoku on the situation, and Sengoku was very pleased with how she and Wood had handled things. They had not only managed to pin the blame on Spandam and his father, keeping the Marines out of trouble, but they had also successfully completed their mission. Now, all that remained was for Wood to retrieve the Pluton blueprints from Tom. If he could do that, the mission would be a complete success. A perfect score. So Tom hid the blueprints in the sea train, and you used that same train to rescue him, only for the blueprints and the train to be destroyed in the bombardment? Sengoku sighed heavily on the other end of the Den Mushi line as he listened to Wood's report. He wasn't angry with Wood or Giant. In fact, he couldn't blame them at all. It was just a tremendous shame. I'm sorry, Fleet Admiral Sengoku. We did everything we could. Wood apologized. It's not your fault. Sengoku reassured him. Compared to that muscle-headed fool Garp, you've done far better than I ever expected. After all, who could have guessed that Tom would hide the blueprints in such a place? At least the world government didn't get their hands on the Pluton blueprints. In that sense, you've succeeded. Sengoku wasn't just trying to comfort Wood. Both he and Giant genuinely believed that even if they had handled the mission themselves, they wouldn't have done any better than Wood and Giant had. Unlike Spandam and his father, who had lost everything, the Marines had even gained an additional admiral candidate. Oh, by the way, Fleet Admiral Sengoku, there's something I need to ask you. What's the deal with my bounty? If you're satisfied with how the mission turned out, then why did you guys decide to raise my bounty from 120 million Baileys to 1 billion? I was planning to head into the New World soon, but with a bounty like this, Every veteran pirate out there will be gunning for me. It wasn't a problem for someone with strength and reputation to have a high bounty, but Wood hadn't even been a pirate for that long. After just about a year as a pirate, his bounty had skyrocketed to 1 billion Baileys. To other pirates, he would seem like a rookie, fresh meat for the taking in the New World. Pirates looking to make a name for themselves typically did so by causing trouble for the Marines or the world government, or by taking down other notorious pirates. A 1 billion Bailey bounty made Wood stand out as a prime target even in the New World. Wood could already imagine the scenario. If he entered the New World with such a bounty, countless pirates would be eager to take him down and claim the credit for defeating a 1 billion Bailey rookie. The decision to raise your bounty to 1 billion Baileys wasn't just made by the Marines. The world government had a significant say in it. After all, you fought the Marine hero Garp to a standstill and cut down 3 Cypher Pol Zero agents in one blow. If we set your bounty too low, it would undermine the authority of both the Marine hero and the world government's top intelligence agency, So you bumped my bounty up to 1 billion Baileys and sent me into the New World as a top-tier pirate? That's insane. It's bad enough being a supernova with a bounty over 100 million Baileys, but this is like a death sentence. A bounty over 100 million might make someone a big deal in the first half of the Grand Line, but in the New World, it was a different story. A 1 billion Bailey bounty was on a whole other level, reserved for pirates who were nearly untouchable by the Marines or who had achieved infamy on a global scale. From what Garp told me, with your current strength, there shouldn't be many people in the New World who could pose a serious threat to you. The pirates in the New World are the ones that really give the Marines trouble. I thought it would take a few more years before you reached this stage, but if you're already this powerful, it's not a bad idea for you to enter the New World and join the ranks of the strongest. When Sengoku heard Jian and Garp's reports on Wood's combat abilities, he had been utterly astonished. He had already tried to estimate Wood's potential as generously as possible, but even then, he hadn't expected Wood to grow so powerful so quickly. If Garp and Jian hadn't exaggerated Wood's abilities, Sengoku was now convinced that Wood was already stronger than the 3 admiral candidates, including Akainu. Chapter 193, Wood becomes a great pirate. Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji. Much of their power comes from their devil fruit abilities. But Wood's strength is built more on his mastery of martial arts and swordsmanship. According to Garp's report, the light that emanated from Wood's chest during battle led Sengoku to speculate that Wood might have consumed some kind of devil fruit. The exact nature of this fruit is unknown, but what's clear is that it greatly enhances Wood's physical abilities. The current 3 admiral candidates are all devil fruit users, with particularly troublesome Logia abilities. Wood's haki, especially his armament haki, is still relatively undeveloped, so injuring someone like Akainu, who can turn into magma, might not be easy. But given that Wood could hold his own against Garp, it's safe to say that defeating him would be no simple task for any of the admiral candidates either. I protest. You all said the undercover mission wouldn't be dangerous. That's the only reason I took it on. But first, I had to navigate a game of cat and mouse with the world government and steal the Pluton blueprints, and now you want me to enter the New World with a 1 billion Baileys bounty as a top-tier pirate. Snore. Snore. Before Wood could finish his rant, the sheep-headed Dendenmushi in his hand had already fallen asleep, complete with a snot bubble growing from its nose. Damn it. As expected, those at the top are the same no matter where you go. They just exploit the workers at the bottom. They work you to the bone and never give you enough in return. What good is a promotion in rank? I'm now a pirate worth 1 billion Baileys, so my navy rank is completely useless. Even though Wood didn't manage to get his hands on the Pluton blueprints, there's no denying that he and Jian handled the mission flawlessly. As a result, Wood got another promotion. From Navy Lieutenant Commander straight to Navy Commander, skipping over the rank of Lieutenant entirely. Of course, it's just a title. There's no pay raise to go with it. In fact, considering Wood's current situation, he can't even collect a paycheck at all. And while a Navy Commander's rank might seem impressive, it's utterly pointless for Wood, because only 5 people in the entire world know about his true identity. And those 5? They're all admirals or vice admirals. A lowly commander like Wood doesn't even get to brag in front of them. Damn it, Sengoku. That old man played me again. How can he call this a reward? Doesn't he worry that I'll really quit and become a full-fledged pirate? Meanwhile, in the Fleet Admiral's office, Sengoku had just hung up the Dendenmushi when Vice Admiral Jian, who had apparently been waiting for some time, entered the room. Aren't you being a bit too harsh on that boy? Don't forget, he's even younger than Jian, and much younger than Akainu and the others. Jian had just learned about what happened at Anai's lobby, and it was clear to her that Jian had thrown herself into intense training as soon as she returned to headquarters, no doubt spurred on by Wood once again. Without the needing to think too hard, Jian knew that Wood had likely dealt another heavy blow to Jian's confidence. Sending a rookie pirate into the new world might be fraught with danger, but if it's that boy Wood, I'm not worried. If you hadn't reminded me, I would have forgotten that Wood is only about 20 years old. Whether it's his strength, talent, or his way of handling situations, he often seems far more mature than his age would suggest. Almost like he's not a young man at all. The way Wood had handled the Anai's lobby incident had completely surpassed Sengoku's expectations. Whether it was his ability to fight on par with Garp or his guidance in helping Jian deal with the situation, Sengoku found himself genuinely impressed. If it weren't for the fact that the positions of Admiral had already been set for Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji, and that Wood was now donning the disguise of a pirate, Sengoku might have even considered grooming Wood for a future admiral position. As for Wood's identity, it seems Garp is particularly interested. He left headquarters early this morning, saying he was going back to the East Blue and planning to visit Wood's birthplace on Maple Leaf Island along the way. Hearing this, Sengoku's face involuntarily twitched. Garp had already left Manafort to return to the East Blue several times now. Sengoku was initially angry, but considering that Garp had contributed during the Anai's lobby incident, he lowered his raised fist in defeat. That old man returning to the East Blue is one thing, but what business does he have on Maple Leaf Island? Is he trying to pull a Zephyr and see if he can find another talented recruit? Out at sea, a marine warship sailed through the first half of the Grand Line. On the deck, a large man wearing a dog-headed hat was fast asleep, snoring loudly. Vice Admiral Garp, our ship is approaching the Maple Leaf Island region. What are your orders? The sound of his officer's voice burst Garp's snot bubble as he rubbed his sleepy eyes and sat up. Find a good place to dock and resupply. I'll head onto the island alone for a while. The officer was clearly stunned by Garp's instructions, even double-checking. Vice Admiral Garp, are you saying you specifically chose Maple Leaf Island just to resupply? But our ship's supplies are still ample, and Maple Leaf Island is only famous for its timber, which isn't exactly something we can eat. When they had set sail, Garp had specifically ordered them to head to Maple Leaf Island, making the Marines on board excitedly speculate that another big mission was at hand. But now, they couldn't believe that they had traveled all this way just to restock supplies. Is the food on Maple Leaf Island really that good? Why had they only ever heard about its famous redwood before? Just go and do it. Why do you have so many questions? Think of it as a few days off. Garp barked. As soon as the ship docked, Garp vanished in a flash, leaving behind the officer and the rest of the crew with their questions unanswered. Sengoku wasn't wrong. Garp's visit to Maple Leaf Island was partly to learn more about Wood's background and partly to see if there were any other promising recruits on the island. After all, it didn't make sense that an island that produced a prodigy like Wood wouldn't have any other talented individuals. Garp had heard from Zephyr that Wood apparently had a younger sister. Zephyr had planned to visit Maple Leaf Island in a couple of years to check on her and see if she had any potential. But once Garp heard that, he decided to get there first. Chapter 194, The Growing Girl. Walking through the streets of Maple Leaf Island, Garp couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. The moment he appeared before the island's inhabitants, the looks they gave him were odd. Clearly, they recognized him. Dressed in a white suit with the emblem of justice emblazoned on his cape, it was obvious to the people of Maple Leaf Island that he was a Marine officer. And not just any officer. Anyone wearing a suit like that had to be at least a high-ranking Marine, likely a general-level officer. While Maple Leaf Island had seen its share of Marines over the years, it had been a long time since someone of such high rank had set foot there. Located in the first half of the Grand Line, the island wasn't exactly a hotspot for notorious pirates. With a Marine branch nearby, pirate attacks had become increasingly rare. For a general-level Marine to show up on the island, there was only one reason that made sense to the locals. So, as soon as they noticed Garp's presence, many of them quietly slipped away in the same direction. The islanders thought they were being discreet, but they failed to consider that Garp was no ordinary Marine. He was a Vice Admiral, and not just any Vice Admiral. What they thought was a perfect cover was riddled with flaws in Garp's eyes. Puzzled by the reaction of the Maple Leaf Island residents, Garp decided to follow them. It didn't take long for him to realize that all the people who had hurried away at the sight of him were heading to the same place. I just saw a Marine on the island. Just like when Admiral Zephyr visited us a few years ago. From the way he's dressed, it's clear he's another big shot from Marine headquarters. The pirates we get on Maple Leaf Island are just small fry, they're not worth sending someone this important. The only reason a Marine of his rank would come here is because of that boy, Wood. After all, he's now a pirate with a 1 billion Bailey's bounty on his head. Before they find you, you and your daughter should take a small boat and get off the island. We'll do our best to cover for you. As soon as the village elder finished speaking, others who had came to deliver the news quickly agreed. Oh, Wood. That boy could have had a bright future as a Marine. Why did he have to make such a terrible choice and become a pirate? As they lamented how the young man who used to struggle with even basic woodcutting had now become a notorious pirate with a 1 billion Baileys bounty, the people of Maple Leaf Island couldn't help but feel a mix of disappointment and sorrow. Maple Leaf Island had once suffered greatly at the hands of pirates, with many families torn apart by their raids. For this reason, the islanders harbored no love for pirates. But Wood was different. At just 15 years old, he had defended them from pirates more than once, protecting the island with all his strength. When they received letters from Wood after he'd earned a promotion to Navy Lieutenant Commander, the people had been so proud of him, seeing him as their island's pride. But their joy was short-lived. Before long, they received terrible news. Wood had betrayed the Navy, releasing prisoners from Impel Down, and becoming the very thing they despised. A pirate. The once proud boy they knew was now one of the most wanted men in the world. They had watched in disbelief as Wood's bounty climbed from 50 million to an incredible 1 billion Baileys. As Wood grew stronger, the people of Maple Leaf Island should have been happy. But the path he had chosen was far from what they had hoped for him. They had envisioned Wood rising through the ranks of the Navy. Lieutenant Commander, Commander, Captain, and perhaps even Admiral one day. Instead, he had become a pirate with a bounty so high it made their heads spin. Though the islanders despised pirates, they couldn't bring themselves to hate Wood. He had grown up before their eyes and had saved them multiple times. So when they saw a general-level Marine like Garp on the island, they rushed to warn Sta and her daughter, Ain. Humphrey, I'm not going anywhere. If a Marine has come here, that's even better. I can finally ask them if the Navy forced Wood to do something that made him betray them. There's no way he would have become a pirate by choice. He hates pirates more than anyone. 5 years had passed, and Ain had grown from a young girl into a graceful young woman. Her blue hair now reached her waist, and she had grown to about 1.6 meters tall, with her figure starting to show signs of maturity. At her current age, Ain was around the same age as Robin. At 1.6 meters tall, she was still growing, and with time, the world of pirates would no doubt see another beautiful, long-legged woman emerge. The person most troubled by Wood's defection was, without a doubt, Ain. Since she was a child, she had always looked up to Wood, who was her most admired figure and the brother she was most proud of. But when Wood's first wanted poster arrived on Maple Leaf Island, Ain refused to believe it. Yet, as the second and third posters arrived, she had no choice but to face the harsh reality. Ain couldn't believe that her brother, who had always hated pirates, could become one himself. Pirates had killed their father, and both Ain and Wood despised them. Unable to accept the truth, Ain convinced herself that Wood must have been forced into it by the Navy. She had gone to the Marine branch on Maple Leaf Island more than once, pleading with the local officers to take her to Marine headquarters in Manafort, where she could ask the fleet admiral what had really happened. Her brother was better than anyone, and even Admiral Zephyr had praised Wood's sense of justice when he was just a teenager. How could someone like him possibly do things like freeing Impel Down prisoners, killing a Marine captain, or attacking Anai's lobby? If these were truly her brother's actions, Ain would rather believe that the prisoners he freed were good people, that the Marine captain was corrupt, and that the attack on Anai's lobby was just a misunderstanding. Ain, don't be foolish. We all know Wood isn't a bad person. But the big shots at Marine headquarters won't care about that. You and your mother are the closest family he has on the island, and if the Marines are here, they're likely going to target you. If they capture you, it'll only make things harder for Wood. So please, listen to us and find somewhere safe to hide on another island. The village elder tried to persuade Ain, but she refused to budge. None of them noticed the tall figure who had silently appeared behind them. Chapter 195, Ain, so this is how you lured my brother away. Ha 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 ha. Well, isn't this something? I hadn't even set foot on the island for long before I became an unwanted guest. Garp's hearty laughter echoed as a shadow loomed over the group. His sudden appearance startled everyone. When they turned to see who it was, they were even more shocked. Standing before them was the towering figure they had seen earlier in town. A man with a muscular build, wearing a dog-shaped hat that gave him a somewhat comical appearance. His cape, emblazoned with the word justice, made it clear he was the high-ranking Marine they had noticed. The moment Sta saw Garp, she instinctively pulled Ain close, shielding her daughter behind her. The village elder and another older villager immediately grabbed onto Garp's legs, hoping to delay him. Seeing the elder's actions, the other villagers who had come to warn Sta quickly followed suit, clutching at Garp's arms and legs. In no time, the once formidable Marine found himself covered in clinging villagers. Their goal was clear, to buy Sta and Ain enough time to escape. What the villagers hadn't realized was that Garp had followed them deliberately, having easily tracked them without their knowledge. Facing a powerful Marine from headquarters, they knew they were no match for him, So they resorted to desperate measures to hold him back. Please, sir, Sta and Dane are just ordinary, law-abiding citizens of Maple Leaf Island. Even though Wood has become a notorious pirate, his crimes shouldn't fall on his family. Besides, Sta isn't even Wood's real mother, and Ain isn't his blood sister. Sta just took him in and raised him. The village elder's plea was quickly echoed by the others. Maple Leaf Island wasn't a large place, and everyone had watched Wood and Ain grow up. They weren't about to let Garp take Ain away. What do you mean not real family? I am Wood's sister, Ain. Years ago, that Marine Admiral Zephyr promised to turn Wood into the best Marine. Now that my brother has become a pirate, I want answers from you. While the others feared Garp and his authoritative presence, Ain showed no such hesitation. Instead of running away, she fixed Garp with a look of intense resentment, her eyes blazing with anger. So, you must be the sister Wood mentioned in the reports. Garp said, smiling appreciatively. Impressive, impressive. You're a girl, but you've got more courage and spirit than many boys I've met. When your brother first met me, he was so scared he nearly couldn't stand. Sta, the village elder, and the others were terrified when Ain dared to confront Garp. They feared that the powerful Marine might retaliate and harm her. But to their surprise, Garp didn't get angry. Instead, he looked at Ain with even more admiration. Vice Admiral, does this mean you're not here to arrest Sta and Ain? The village elder asked cautiously. Garp's demeanor suggested he wasn't hostile, but the elder wanted to be sure. When did I ever say I came to Maple Leaf Island to arrest his girl? Garp replied. And you all can let go of me now. I don't hold grudges, but it's a hot day, and if you break these old bones of mine, can you handle the charge of attacking a Marine? Hearing this, the villagers quickly released their grip. Now that they knew Garp wasn't an enemy, no one wanted to keep clinging to the old man. I came to Maple Leaf Island to learn more about Wood. Garp explained. But now that you've brought it up, why don't you two come back to Manafort with me? The moment Garp suggested this, the villagers prepared to leap at him again, intending to stop him from taking Ain and her mother away. But this time, Garp wasn't in the mood to be mobbed again. With a swift instant transmission, he vanished from their sight, leaving the villagers to fall flat on the ground. When he reappeared, Garp was standing right in front of Sta and Ain. See? All Marines are liars. You're just like the ones who tricked my brother into leaving with them. Ain's voice was filled with fury as she glared at Garp. The villagers, seeing Garp standing before Ain and Sta, were equally furious. He had said he wasn't there to arrest them, yet now he was talking about taking them to Manafort. It felt like they were being played. I think you've misunderstood me. Garp said calmly. I'm not taking them to Manafort to arrest them. If that were the case, I'd just throw them into Impel Down or take them to a nice lobby. Well, what's left of it, anyway? No, I want them to come to Manafort for their own safety. As Wood continues down his path, he's bound to make enemies. It's only a matter of time before someone targets you to get to him. Garp's explanation seemed to calm the villagers slightly, but Ain still felt something was off. Why would a high-ranking Marine like Garp want to protect her and her mother, especially when her brother was now a notorious pirate? It didn't add up. Seeing the doubt in Ain's eyes, Garp's expression softened with understanding. As expected of Wood's sister, you're just as sharp as he is. To be honest, I'm here because someone asked me to come. You've heard of Black Arm Zephyr, right? He's the one who brought your brother into the Navy. Wood was his student, and even though he's fallen into piracy, Zephyr doesn't want his family to suffer because of it. He asked me to see if you'd be willing to move to Manafort, where you'd be safer. Zephyr's family had been killed by pirates seeking revenge, and now that Wood was in a similar situation, Zephyr didn't want history to repeat itself. He had asked Garp more than once to help protect Wood's family. It was only when the village elder and the others had rushed to protect Sta and Ain that Garp realized just how valid Zephyr's concerns were. And so, he made the offer. Chapter 196, Ain decides to join the Navy to uncover the truth. Being a double agent like Wood was bound to make enemies on both sides, but it also came with its own unique challenges. Typically, only the families of high-ranking officers were allowed to live in Manafort, and with Wood's naval identity being entirely hidden, Sta and Ain didn't technically qualify. However, with the backing of Black Arm Zephyr, the Marine hero Garp, and the approval of Fleet Admiral Sengoku, moving Sta and Ain to Manafort seemed feasible. If we moved to Manafort, would I be able to join the Navy? Ain asked suddenly. She had tried several times to get to Marine headquarters through the local Navy branch but had always been turned away. Now, hearing that Garp could take them directly to Manafort, Ain's interest was piqued. Even though she wasn't yet of age, Ain was no fool. She could tell from Garp's demeanor that he wasn't lying. Besides, if Garp really intended to harm them, Ain knew that no one here would be able to stop him. Because of Wood's decision to join the Navy, Ain had spent some time researching its structure. Garp held the rank of Vice Admiral, and someone at that level could practically do as they pleased in the first half of the Grand Line. The highest-ranking officer at the local branch was just a captain, a rank that would be considered minor at Marine headquarters. When Garp heard Aang ask if she could join the Navy, he was overjoyed. He had been worried that because of Wood's situation, convincing Aang to join the Navy might be difficult. But to his surprise, she had brought it up herself. Aang's desire to join the Navy had only just occurred to her. Before, she had simply wanted to go to Manafort to ask the Fleet Admiral why her brother would have gone astray. But now, with Zephyr inviting them to live in Marineford and Garp's surprisingly respectful attitude, Aang found the whole situation rather suspicious. Wood had been Zephyr's student, and if Wood had betrayed the Navy, wouldn't Zephyr view him as a disgrace? Why would he be concerned about the safety of Wood's family instead? And why would a Marine officer like Garp, who had every reason to hold a grudge against them, be so polite? Moreover, despite Wood now being a pirate, Garp referred to him in a familiar and almost affectionate manner. Everything about this situation felt off to Aang, making her think that there must be more to the story behind her brother's fall from grace. She knew that as a nobody, no one would tell her the truth outright. If she wanted answers, she'd have to find them herself. If joining the Navy was her way to Manafort, then she would do it. She'd work her way up through the ranks, and one day, she'd uncover the real reason behind her brother's betrayal. If you want to join the Navy, the usual way is through the annual recruitment process. Garp explained. But if you want to join outside of that, you'd need a recommendation from a senior officer. If you're serious about this, I can recommend you. But how about you become my student? What do you say? Garp was clearly impressed by the spirit Aang had shown, and he saw great potential in her. As a vice admiral and a man known for repeatedly cornering the pirate king, Roger, Garp felt confident that taking on a civilian girl as his student was well within his rights. However, Garp's reputation as a marine hero didn't seem to sway Aang. She politely declined his offer, expressing instead her desire to become Admiral Zephyr's student, as he was the teacher of the brother she admired so much. Aang's ultimate goal was to uncover the truth behind Wood's fall from grace, and she believed that Zephyr, as Wood's teacher, would hold key information. Zephyr's concern for Wood's family, despite his student becoming a pirate, was particularly strange. To learn what Zephyr knew, Aang thought the quickest way was to become his student. She suspected that Garp might also know something, but Zephyr seemed like a more direct source. As Aang weighed her options, Garp felt a wave of disappointment. He hadn't expected this. He thought he could get ahead of Zephyr and take Aang as his own student, but instead, she had chosen Zephyr over him. Garp had to admit that Zephyr was indeed a formidable warrior, but if it came down to a fight, Garp was confident he could come out on top. As for rank, well, Garp was only a vice admiral, but he was sure he had more clout at Marine headquarters than Zephyr. Besides, Zephyr already had plenty of students, while Garp had never officially taken on a student before. By any measure, it seemed Aang would have more opportunities under his tutelage. But Aang seemed determined to follow in her brother's footsteps and study under Zephyr. Garp couldn't help but feel frustrated. He had gone out of his way, only to end up as a glorified errand boy, running around to find another promising student for Zephyr. Feeling downcast, Garp returned to his hometown of Fouusha village in the East Blue. With no outlet for his frustration, he decided to train his grandsons, Luffy and Ace, even harder. Garp had high hopes for both boys. With their bloodlines, Garp was certain they were destined to become powerful figures on the seas. On this visit to Fouusha village, Garp had even considered taking Ace and Luffy to Manafort to train them personally. But their identities were far too sensitive. Ace was the son of the Pirate King, Roger, and Luffy was the son of the revolutionary leader, Dragon. Bringing those two to Manafort might be more trouble than even Garp could handle. Chapter 197, The Idol of Young Ace and Luffy. Because of the unique circumstances surrounding Ace and Luffy's identities, Garp had decided to leave the two boys in Fouusha village under the care of the bandit Didon. Garp's dream was for both Ace and Luffy to grow into exceptional Marines, but before taking them to Marine headquarters, he wanted to ensure they had the skills necessary to protect themselves. Given that Ace and Luffy spent most of their time at the Great Terminal and were raised by Didon, a mountain bandit, their personalities had become wild and unruly over the years. This was far from the disciplined and well-behaved Marines Garp had envisioned them becoming. Ace and Luffy were naturally competitive and had a deep admiration for the powerful figures who roamed the seas. To give them a positive role model, Garp had told them stories of Wood during one of his visits 2 years ago. When Ace and Luffy heard that Wood had, at the age of 13 or 14, already taken down multiple pirate crews and protected Maple Leaf Island, they couldn't help but idolize him. For Garp, having his grandsons admire Wood, who was a Marine at the time, was ideal. Garp had planned to introduce them to Wood, hoping he would guide Ace and Luffy on the path to becoming exemplary Marines. Everything seemed to be falling into place, with Garp's plans moving smoothly. However, when Garp returned to Fuusha village this time, he was shocked to discover that his two grandsons had somehow gone off the rails without his knowledge. The reason for this turn of events was, in fact, quite simple. Ace and Luffy had never been particularly interested in becoming Marines like their grandfather. They were drawn to the idea of becoming strong and powerful, and Wood, who was not much older than them but already incredibly strong, seemed like the perfect role model. Now that Wood, the hero of their grandfather's stories, had transitioned from a Marine to a pirate, Ace and Luffy found him even more appealing. They had already admired Wood, but hearing about his exploits, one daring adventure after another, had completely captivated them. They were now wholly fixated on the idea of setting out to sea and becoming pirates themselves. When Garp saw how dedicated his grandsons were to their training, he should have been pleased. However, when he learned that their motivation was not to become outstanding Marines, but to become pirates instead, Garp was nearly driven to madness. That Wood, who Grandpa always praised, is a pirate now too. And he's a big shot with a bounty of 1 billion Baileys. Ace declared, excitement clear in his voice. That means being a pirate must be way more fun than being a Marine, so when we grow up, we'll become pirates too. Yeah. I heard from Shanks that being a pirate is way more exciting than being a Marine. Luffy added enthusiastically, shaking a bounty poster in Garp's face, one that he had somehow gotten his hands on. Garp snatched the poster from Luffy, and upon closer inspection, recognized it as Wood's latest bounty poster. The young man in the image had black hair, held a sword in each hand, and stood proudly against the wind. He looked every bit the dashing figure that Ace and Luffy admired. But as Garp stared at the poster, his fury began to boil over. His anger felt like it was going to burst out of the top of his head. Gritting his teeth, Garp tore the poster into shreds, muttering through clenched teeth. It's all Sengoku's fault. If that old fool hadn't given with that damn undercover mission, none of this would have happened. Now, the role model I set up for them has turned into a pirate. Garp had everything planned out perfectly, but what he hadn't anticipated was Sengoku assigning Wood to an undercover mission that led him down the path of piracy. Garp was tempted to tell Ace and Luffy the truth, but that information was classified, and both Ace and Luffy were still just kids. If they accidentally let something slip, it could put Wood in even more danger. Where did you get this bounty poster? And who's been filling your heads with stories about Wood? It better not have been that good-for-nothing dun. Garp barked. The East Blue was known as the weakest of the seas, and Fuusha village was a remote, insignificant place. News COO birds rarely flew out to such isolated spots, and even when news did reach them, it was often long after it had circulated through the Grand Line. Garp had come back to the East Blue primarily to control the narrative, but to his surprise, his grandsons had already heard about Wood before he even got there. It was Shanks who told me. Luffy exclaimed. He said Wood is probably the strongest young pirate in the world. He caused a huge commotion at Impel Down, single-handedly stormed a Marine branch and killed a Marine captain, and then he even destroyed Anai's lobby. Ace and Luffy only had a vague understanding of places like Impel Down and Anai's lobby. But they knew that if someone as powerful as Shanks thought Wood was strong, it must be true. Moreover, Ace and Luffy had seen the newspapers. They knew that even their grandfather, who they regarded as an unbeatable force of nature, hadn't been able to defeat Wood. This only made them admire Wood even more. In their eyes, Garp was an almost invincible figure, someone they could never hope to surpass no matter how hard they trained. If even Garp couldn't beat Wood, then Wood must be unimaginably powerful. It was clear now. His grandsons, who had the potential to become outstanding Marines, had completely gone off course. At this moment, Garp found himself harboring resentment toward three people. The first was Sengoku, who had disrupted his plans for Wood by assigning that damn undercover mission. The second was the damned red-haired Shanks, who filled Luffy's head with ideas about becoming a pirate every time he visited Fuusha village. If Garp ever caught Shanks on the island, he'd make sure to crush his head in. As for the third person, Garp wasn't angry at Wood. He was angry at himself. If he had known that Ace and Luffy would idolize Wood, who had turned pirate, he wouldn't have gone easy on Wood at Anai's lobby. He would have knocked Wood flat and shown Ace and Luffy that the Marines were the true power in the world. But it was too late now. Unless Garp could bring Wood to Fuusha village and beat him in front of Ace and Luffy, the two boys would continue to believe that Wood was just as strong as their grandfather. Meanwhile, Wood, oblivious to the fact that he was now the subject of attention from Garp and his grandsons, was sailing through the first half of the Grand Line aboard the Dark Maru II. Having just passed Fishman Island and heading toward the New World. After the Anai's lobby incident, Wood had first returned to pick up Robin. As for the people from Tom's Workers, they couldn't go back to Water 7. Frankie and Iceberg were just kids, But Tom had now become a wanted man by the world government, with a hefty bounty on his head due to the secrets of Pluton. Chapter 198, The first meeting with Queen Atoheim. The pirate ship Dark Mara that once belonged to Wood and his crew was completely obliterated by the world government's bombardment on Anai's lobby. Not even a single plank could be salvaged from the wreckage. With their ship destroyed, Wood and his companions had no choice but to hitch a ride with Tiger and his crew, making their way to the Sabati archipelago. In gratitude for Wood and his crew's help, Tom and his two disciples, using whatever materials they could find,